to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20 and the 12th supplement to the Mayoral Proclamation declaring the existence of a local emergency dated February 25th, 2020. And before we proceed further, I'd like to ask the Commission staff member, Ronald Contreras, who is acting as our moderator today, to explain some of the procedures for today's remote meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The minutes of this meeting will reflect that due to COVID-19 health emergency and to protect Commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms of City Hall are closed. However, Commission members and staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, and federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend the meeting through video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as if they were physically present. Please note that today's meeting is being live cablecast on SFGov TV and streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Once again, streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunities to speak during the public comment period are available via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001. Again, the phone number is 1-415-655-0001. Access code is 146-623-9397. Again, the access code is 146-623-9397, followed by the pound sign, and then press pound again to join as an attendee. You will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will automatically be muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand and to be added to the public comment line. You will then hear, "You have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you." The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Ensure that you're in a quiet location. Before you speak, mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is especially important that you mute your computer if you are watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says your line has been unmuted, this is your turn to speak. You will hear staff say, "Welcome, caller." We encourage you to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment. 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you have changed your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say you have lowered your hand. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and mute you. You will hear your line has been muted. Attendees who wish to speak during other public comment periods may stay on the line and listen for the next public comment opportunity and should raise their hands to enter the public comment line by pressing *3 when their next item of interest comes up. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we will call the meeting to order. And let's proceed with agenda item number 1, which is roll call.
Commissioners, please unmute your microphone so that you can verbally state your presence at today's meeting after your name is called. Commissioner Bell.
Here.
Commissioner Bush.
Present.
Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Present.
Madam Chair, with 4 members present and accounted for, you have a quorum.
Thank you, moderator. Before we proceed to agenda item number 2, as you know, Chair Ambrose had resigned from her position a few days ago. Chair Ambrose has served on this commission for a little bit over 3 years, the past year and a half as our fearless leader as chair. And during this time, the city was hit with 2 very toxic viruses. While we have little control over the natural one, but we must confront the public corruption virus that has shaken the public's trust in our city. Under her steady leadership, and as reflected in our annual report and an increase in our annual budget this year, the chair has successfully guided this commission to focus on proactive and preventive initiatives to build a healthier and cleaner government so that we can earn back the public trust. So for that, we owe Chair Ambrose our deepest gratitude, and we wish her nothing but the best in the future endeavors. And if other commissioners want to share their comments and thoughts. Commissioner Bush.
I'd just like to underscore what you've said and add to that that she has brought legal skills from her experience as a deputy city attorney and from working as the attorney for a number of commissions. And she also has had a good handle on the values of the commission as it moves forward. And I think that we all owe her a debt of gratitude for her work.
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. And Commissioner Chiu?
Yes, I'd like to associate myself. Thank you, Chair Lee. I'd like to associate myself with your remarks and with my fellow Commissioner Bush's remarks. And just wanted to add that Chair Ambrose took over the leadership of the commission in an extraordinary time, unprecedented times. And I think that she led with grace and dignity in really challenging circumstances and continued to welcome public participation and tried to make our meetings as open and accessible as possible, notwithstanding the complications of phone calls and digital distance. And for that, I really want to thank her for her leadership and wish her all the best in her future endeavors.
Thank you, Commissioner Chiu. So with that, let's proceed to agenda number 2, which is public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda today. Moderator, can you check on any incoming calls?
Please stand by. Come on, mouse. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission now receiving public comment on agenda item 2 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. If you joined the meeting earlier to listen to the proceedings, now is your time to get online to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It is important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. So it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on agenda item 2, public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. You will have up to 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue.
Okay.
All right. Give me a moment here. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Judith Reese, and I'm calling in today about item number 7, about Jennifer Stojkovic. I did some sunshine of my own, and I found that Ms. Stojkovic had had communication with Supervisor Matt Haney in the months of May and June of this year, yet she failed to report that on the San Francisco lobbying registry page. And I'm I'm confused because she self-reported these things that she had done, and now she's doing it again. And I don't know what's going on with her being on the consent calendar. Seems slightly like a slap on the wrist. And if she was changing her ways, that would make sense to me. But she's not. She's just going back to what she was doing and not reporting stuff. I submitted a document to the clerk earlier this morning, and I will make sure to send it to the public comment area so you guys can take a look at it. But it shows that she had several emails with the supervisor. She didn't report it on the lobbying registry website. And what they worked on actually ended up in a bill that Matt Haney has put forward. And so it's obviously lobbying stuff. And yeah, and also thank you guys for all your work. In this last year, you guys have been really consistent about looking at all these scandals, and that really reassures me as a citizen of this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Next caller, please.
Okay, please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Good morning. Good morning, Ethics Commissioners. Thank you for your services. And my name is Ellen Lee Zhao. Ellen is E-L-L-E-N, Lee, L-E-E-Z-H-O-U. I am a public social worker, and I am representing the union, SEIU, government employees. I am here to request you, the Ethics Commissioners, reopen City Hall, reopen your Ethics Commission so the public can have a chance to know what's going on. I am a member of Revival of San Francisco. I'm here to remind you, our nation, our government was founded by godly people. And that is why we have the United States Constitution. And that's why that we are one nation under God, and in God we trust. For a government and a school, a public schools, pushing God away and tell people and brainwash our children has no place. Nothing. It's going to be good for San Francisco. I have been coming to ethics commissions with many other government employees back in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. The last time I spoke to your commission in person at City Hall, February 21st, 2020. And after that, the San Francisco City Hall had been running a government for self-interest. There's no public interest whatsoever. The last public hearing that I spoke to you was in July 9th, 2021, which is last month, virtually on the phone. I reported to you there's a lot of corruption inside San Francisco City Hall. Many of the many of the electoral officials related to communism. That is why that we, the people, has been violated by the electoral officials. Emergency health order is only good for 60 days. From March 2020 to May 2020, anything beyond June 2020 until now, there's no emergency order. As you can see, many of the people who love life, love God, and love America file lawsuits in California, and we won lawsuits against a dictatorship government, and that's why that many places are allowed to be open.
Your 3 minutes has expired.
Well, but right now, you guys not doing your job by closing your office. It has to be open to the public. The public has no more emergency. Our government...
I'm sorry. Your 3 minutes were up, caller. Did we want to give her a few more extra time? Okay, Madam Chair, we have other callers in the queue.
Okay, next caller, please.
Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm calling in today because I was actually just listening to the Ethics Commission meeting for the day, and I heard this item about Judith Reese, from Judith Reese, about Jennifer on item 7, and I just think that it should definitely be severed from the consent calendar because it's really important that I think you take a closer look at it. And Judith Reese sent in that big packet to the clerk, so I just think that it'd be really important that you all sever it today. And I appreciate all your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, please stand by. We have other callers in the queue. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you very much. This is Anonymous. Good morning. First, this commission should investigate the interactions between Walter Wong, London Breed, her campaign and city staff, and the San Francisco-Shanghai Sister City Committee revealed in public records regarding financing for the 2020 Chinese New Year parade floats, and I've sent you that documentation. Second, the mitigating factors identified by staff in the matter of London Breed should be given little to no weight. That, combined with Breed's high total annual compensation and thus her ability to pay, which is also a factor, should increase the proposed fines. Your staff says regarding the unlawful gift from a subordinate, quote, in mitigation, Breed voluntarily reported the gift. However, Breed only reported the gift after the subordinate, Mohammed Nuru, was arrested by the FBI, and she denied responsibility under state law in her public post about that gift. Your staff further says, quote, further, Breed had no prior record of violations of the city's campaign finance laws, and this violation appears to have been an isolated incident. However, this incident was only brought to light after one of the campaign contributors, Nick Bovis, was arrested and a reporter publicly exposed records of these transactions. According to public records, the other contributor, John Constant, has asked Breed in the past for assistance regarding homeless persons and the use of other city services. And Breed has in fact asked agencies to assist Constant and his colleagues when he asks for it, and I've provided you documentation of that as well. And this commission or its staff chooses to completely ignore the numerous violations of other law under your jurisdiction, specifically the Sunshine Ordinance, committed by London Breed, and so incorrectly underestimate their cumulative severity. Namely, Breed has been found just since October 2019 to have personally committed 3 separate violations of Sunshine, SOTF files 19047, 19103, and 20033. All involve Breed conducting public business in secret by failing to disclose various information about her meetings and calendars as required by law. And for all of those reasons, you should increase the fine that London Breed has to pay. Now, your new chair talked about how this commission is fighting corruption. You cannot do that if you completely ignore the Sunshine Ordinance, which apparently this commission, or more importantly, its staff does. You never investigate these Sunshine violations, while the only other body that does, the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, does actually do so, finds dozens of violations each year, and this Ethics Commission does absolutely nothing about them. You need to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. All right. Let me just do one more check, Madam Chair. Okay, Madam Chair, hold. Please stand by. Madam Chair, there are no more callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on agenda item number 3, which is under consent calendar. Do I have a Cindy, additional comments? Otherwise, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Who moved?
Any second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Do we need public comment on item number 3?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was a comment. My apologies. Public comment, please.
And
Okay.
I'm sorry for interrupting Chair Lee and Mr. Contreras, but I just want to clarify for the benefit of the commission and the public that ordinarily when you hear items on a consent calendar, you hear all of them collectively. And so you'll actually, before you right now, are items 3 through 8.
Right.
And so I just want to clarify that the motion that the commission just entertained was to approve all of the consent items together, and that public comment will be on all of those items collectively.
Okay. Can we take out the draft minutes first and approve that separately, and then we deal with the other items under consent calendar?
Certainly, yeah. You have the prerogative to handle those items separately.
Okay, so why don't I call out the draft minutes of the July 9th commission meeting. And if we don't have any comments from the commissioners, let's open up for public comment.
Okay, please stand by. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. The other commissioners now receiving public comment on consent calendar item number 3 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you have just joined the meeting early to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get in line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It is important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Excuse me. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. So it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comments to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently taking public comment on consent calendar item 3, draft minutes of the Commission's July 9th, 2021 regular meeting. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue.
Okay.
Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Hi, I didn't raise my hand.
Yeah, your hand is still showing. I noticed that you were still, from the previous comment. So if you can just lower your hand.
Did I need to lower my hand?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Okay, please stand by. We have another caller in the queue. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now. Caller, you had your hand raised earlier for the first public comment. We are currently on consent on the item number 3. Did you still want to comment on this? Madam. Okay, looks like he lowered his hand. Okay. We are still waiting to see if there's any further calls. Please stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you. So can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes, the draft minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Bell, seconded by Commissioner Chu. Roll call, please.
A motion has been made.
The motion was by Commissioner Bush, for the record.
Oh, my apologies.
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush?
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Chair Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
With 4 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay, now we proceed into consent items 4 to 8. Agenda item number 4 is a proposed stipulation decision and order in the matter of Norman Yee for Supervisor 2016. Norman Yee and Lisa Lay, SFEC complaint number 1617-020. Agenda item number 5, proposed stipulation decision and order in the matter of Eamonn, Herlihy, and Richard Hart, SFEC complaint number 1819-062, 1920 to 0-035. Agenda item 6, in the matter of John Dennis for Supervisor 2018, John Dennis and Kelly Lawler. Agenda item number 7, in the matter of Jennifer Stojkovic. And agenda item number 8, in the matter of yes on Proposition B and Rebecca Olson. We'll open it for public comment, please.
Okay, please stand by. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on consent calendar items 4 through 8 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. You'll hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you've joined the meeting earlier to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get in line to speak. If you haven't already, please press *3. It is important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. So it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently taking public comment on consent calendar items 4 through 8. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to public comment queue. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue.
Okay.
Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Hi, this is Judith Reese again, and I was just wondering if you could sever item number 7. I just think that there needs to be more of a discussion around that, and I'd really appreciate it if you would sever it. So thank you, and that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Hi, good morning. I also called in earlier, and I'm following up on Judith's request to sever item 7. So I just want to confirm that it's being severed. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Commissioners, let me inform you, for those of us who are watching at home on this TV, we did not have the information how to call in. The only way you can get it is by going to the internet and getting the agenda item, and then that's how I got in. So the people who want to call in, the number is not being shown on the screen. And I'm bringing this to your information. So really, I just called in to inform you that this has to be corrected. The gentleman who is facilitating this meeting keeps saying press start 3. Yes. But we don't have the number and we don't have the ID code. So correct that as soon as possible so that we can participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. It looks like okay, Madam Chair. There are no future callers, and there's no more callers in the queue.
First, these are really challenging times to hold remote meetings, and on behalf of the commission, I want to thank the callers for their patience and their participation, and we will definitely look into ways to make it easier for the folks to access and to participate fully in these meetings. In light of the comments and suggestions to several one of the items, I wonder if there's any interest to address the agenda item number 7, or if the staff has anything to add or to clarify for the public.
Chair Lee, if I may interject just briefly and make a suggestion about how to move forward. Okay. So I think we've heard from the public, none of them were interested in offering public comment on the other items you just called. So the commission can go ahead and vote and approve those separate stipulations.
Okay.
And then we could then come back and focus on item number 7. Okay. Because a member of the public did request to have that be considered separately, which is part of our bylaws procedures. So we can sort of take care of the other ones, come back to item 7, invite the commission to speak about item 7 if they wish to do so, and then see if there's any public comment or further resolution of that matter.
Great. Thank you, Assistant City Attorney. So why don't we entertain a motion to approve under consent calendar agenda items 4, 5, 6, and 8 right now.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Bush, seconded by Commissioner Chu. Roll call, please.
A motion has been made and set. Can you, I'm sorry, it looks like we, please stand by. It looks like we had a last submission, and please stand by. Hold on, I'm sorry. A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush?
Aye.
Commissioner Chu?
Aye.
Chair Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
With 4 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
Now let's go back. So now let's go back to agenda item number 7. Is there any discussion? Any hands?
Clearly, this is Investigator Eric Willett, if I may.
Yes, please.
I administer the Commission Streamlined program, and I can say that the step before you today resolves prior liability. And if staff discover additional liability, we can pursue further administrative enforcement. And under our Streamlined program, a respondent may become ineligible based on prior enforcement actions and ineligible for that future matter to be resolved in the Streamlined program. So if the allegations that we've heard today bear fruit, then that would be a separate enforcement matter that may be ineligible in the future for the Streamlined program. However, we've resolved prior liability, and that is what we put forward in the stipulated agreement before the commission today.
Commissioner Chu, you have your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lee. I have a few questions that I'm hoping that Mr. Willett could clarify. So I wanted to make sure I understand. There are 22 reports from January 2018 until May of 2021 that she needs to amend. So is this that the reports were filed and did not contain the complete disclosure that was necessary?
Original filings did not contain the required reporting, and they have since been amended prior to the stipulated agreement put forth before the commission. The corrective action has been taken on these 22 lobbyist reports, and this matter is resolved for that prior liability with the stipulated agreement.
I mean, these reports cover a period of almost 3.5 years, and do you have a sense of the number of contacts that were disclosed in these 22 reports, amended reports?
Yes, and under the exhibit description of violation, since Ms. Stojkovic qualified as a lobbyist, a contact lobbyist in January of 2018, she's made 40 lobbyist contacts on behalf of her employer, SF City. And the predominant liability here was a failure to report the portion of her salary that she received from SF City to make those contacts. So in all but one instance, she had failed to report her salary, and in another instance, she had failed to report one contact.
I see.
So there was a total of 40 over the course of the time that she's been qualified.
So then the bulk of the violations were a failure to report her payment, not the contact itself.
Correct, and that's why the penalty here, which is pegged to the salary received, is at $931, which represents a portion of that salary reported as payments received from her employer, SF City.
So I'm going to ask a broader question now. So that when someone qualifies as a lobbyist, what kind of training or information or resources do they have so that they know what their obligations are as a lobbyist going forward?
Sure, there is training that the lobbyists can receive, and our website also has an abundance of resources available to the lobbyists, as well as a commission staffer who administers the lobbyist program. John Kim is his name, and he's very proactive about engaging with the lobbyist community within San Francisco.
Okay. And then, so presumably the contacts that were disclosed, these were the only contacts, I'm sorry that I'll draw that question. And I note that the first violation, number 22 here, is January of 2018. So that's 3.5 years ago. When did this come to the commission's attention as a matter of investigation?
I can't speak to an investigative record. I can only speak to the information contained in the stipulated agreement, because that is an agreement between staff and the respondent. But I can say that the liability in this stipulated agreement is the prior liability that staff has pursued and sought resolution to.
I see, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chu. Commissioner Bush, you need your hand up?
Thank you. I was muted there for a minute. If I understood one of the callers saying that there was a failure to disclose a contact in May of 2021, isn't that a period that's also covered in this stipulation?
That is correct. And Ms. Stojkovic reported a contact with board president, Mr. Walton, and had failed to report the salary she had received for that contact. And she has since amended her statement to reflect payment received for that individual contact. Now, if staff discover future liability for that month of May 2021, that would be an additional enforcement matter. And as I mentioned earlier, that the existence of this streamlined resolution before the commission may necessitate that any future enforcement matters with Ms. Stojkovic for provisions of law covered under this STIP may deem her ineligible for streamlined treatment and resolution under the mainline program, where there is a more robust recital of facts, as well as the potential for higher financial penalties in the mainline program as opposed to the streamlined program.
Did the commission staff interview this person in person?
Again, the investigative record is confidential, and I can only speak to the information contained here in this STIP.
I need clarification. Is the position that the commission cannot know whether there was an interview that took place?
The
That's
investigative
correct.
record.
Yeah, sorry, Senior Investigator Willett. That's correct, Commissioner Bush. We would consider the scope and method and substance and conduct of the investigation to remain confidential.
That seems kind of remarkable to me, that the commission would not know what was involved in reaching the conclusion that the staff did about the liability in a case like this. Is that a part of our regulations? Where does that come from?
Well, for one thing, it's in the charter that we conduct investigations confidentially. But I think more to the point would be the way that the charter and the regulations construct a division of labor within the commission. So the staff represent the prosecutorial arm of the commission. The commission represents effectively the judge, and so the commission can't participate in investigations. And when staff present a proposed resolution, what we put, as Senior Investigator Willett said, what we put before the commission is a negotiated document. And so generally we find that what's in the document has to speak for itself. We can't go beyond those four corners. Part of what's beyond those four corners is confidential investigative information. Part of what's beyond those four corners is confidential settlement communications. So I understand it may be frustrating for commissioners having to evaluate whether to vote yay or nay on a proposal from staff, but really the options available to you are that you can give feedback, you can express misgivings about the proposal before you can vote to approve it or reject it. If you elect to reject it, we always appreciate as specific feedback as possible, so that, as Mr. Willett said, we can pursue additional investigation if necessary, or prepare other proposed administrative resolutions that the commission may find more satisfying.
Just not to belabor this, but for a slightly wider lens on this, I served on a bond oversight committee where we evaluated whether the city's bond money was being spent appropriately. And we had hearings on those, and we did ask questions in those cases. And I believe that Chair Lee served on the police commission, and that the police commission, I know that they take up issues of compliance with the process. I don't know if they were asked more detailed questions or it was just yes or no. Perhaps Chair Lee has an opinion on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. Given today's full agenda items, I just have one really quick question to either Mr. Pierce or Mr. Willett. Can you tell us the difference between approving today's stipulation and start a new investigation based on the new information that we received today that we need to fully investigate? Or should we just go back to investigate and adopt to the final proposed stipulation based on your investigation? So what's the difference between approving things now, start anew, or tabling everything, continue or stop or do the investigation and amend or to reflect that on the stipulation for the commission? So what is the difference? What does it mean to this lobbyist? Does it mean that if we approve it today, she's going to have a clean bill of health? She's going to continue to do, her professional work? What's at stake right now? Because I'm really leaning on, based on the new information, I'm not comfortable approving this item until the staff can come back with more updated and clear information for us to consider.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to defer to you, the Director of Enforcement, Mr. Pierce.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question, Chair Lee. If I could try to offer a kind of broad response that might address the concerns that both you and Commissioner Bush have raised. I mean, I think immediately to your question, Chair Lee, if the Commission declines to approve the stipulation today, I believe staff would understand from that decision that you worry that there may be additional liability beyond the scope of what's in front of you, and you would prefer that staff investigate more thoroughly and potentially prepare a different proposed resolution to that full scope of liability. I think it would be staff's view that if you decline to approve this stipulation as approved, we likely would no longer treat it under the Streamlined program. We would probably kick it over to the Mainline program, because what the Commission envisions is a fuller scope of investigation. When the Commission approved this program, the aim was to create a more accelerated, predictable, and transparent approach to resolving certain forms of liability, and this is one of those forms. But there are reasons why conduct wouldn't be handled underneath this. I think more broadly, if the Commission wants additional information about the facts, if the Commission wants more information about what staff did or did not investigate, this is not the venue for that conversation. The venue for that conversation would be administrative proceedings. So staff could pursue probable cause and ultimately bring a hearing on the merits before the Commission if the Commission wanted much fuller access to the facts and to what staff did. Finally, to Commissioner Bush's question about whether there's something unique about this situation in comparison to the Bond Oversight Committee or the Police Commission, my guess is that the Bond Oversight Committee had broad powers to investigate bond compliance, but maybe lacked powers to impose penalties. And that is a unique feature of this division of labor. It imposes specific due process considerations that staff and the Commission have to adhere to. Because you have remedial powers, penalty powers, you may not, in this context, get to hear as many of the facts or review the investigative record in the same way that you might have in those other circumstances. But again, you could, in a different context, which would be a hearing on the merits.
Commissioner Bush?
Just to clarify, the Bond Oversight Committee has the authority to stop the sale of bonds if we find that there was something untoward in the way it was being done. So that's a pretty strong authority given to the committee to act in a penalty way.
Commissioner Bell, your hands up.
My hand went up after Commissioner Chu, so I will defer to her.
Oh,
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. I just had a follow-up question for either Mr. Willett or Mr. Pierce regarding the streamlined approach to these violations. I see that there's a range of penalties and fines right now under the Streamlined program. Can you tell us what under the regular program, what the fines would otherwise be for the multiplicity of violations? Like Commissioner Lee, I'm concerned about the new allegations that surfaced in public comment and that the extensive number of contacts that were made without disclosure, and would like to understand what under the regular program, the consequences for such a long 3.5-year stream of failure to disclose violations would result in.
Sure, I can field that question. Commissioner Chu, under the mainline program, pursuant to the charter, the maximum penalty is $5,000 per violation, or 3 times the amount of payments Ms. Stojkovic received that she failed to report on her monthly lobbyist report, and that's whichever is greater. So either 5,000 or treble damages.
And do we have those numbers or no? It's significant.
I wouldn't be able to do the math on the fly, no.
Okay, thank you. In any event, it would be significantly greater than what's proposed here, the maximum liability.
Likely so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bell?
Thank you, Chair Lee. So I would like the Director of Enforcement to weigh in on this question for me. It's to resolve this what I'm feeling is this notion that we're asked to deliberate on something but not have a level of information that we think gives us the ability to deliberate on it. And then if there are new charges, then we kind of want to send it back. So I want to have you respond to this. So I am not interested in substituting the staff's judgment with mine unless I have some sense of the facts. But then you say that the procedures are that we can't give you a level of facts. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can hear a rationale for how you came to the decisions rather than getting into, well, this interviewee said that and this person said this. And so we don't, want to, well, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to step into that terrain because you're staff for a reason, but we're also not just a rubber stamp. And so there has to be a balance between respecting the staff's talents, abilities, and skills, and also hearing what you use to come to those judgments, so that if we are going to try to substitute, or not substitute, but if we're going to try to weigh in based upon our own abilities and what the public says, that we have something to weigh. And so I feel Commissioner Bush's kind of reticence about this. And then my other commissioners like, well, there's new information that we're hearing today from the public. But I'd like to know, is there a way that we can hear how the rationales came to be, what might have been compelling to you without stepping into your investigative thing? Because as I look at this, I mean, when somebody's got, 22 bites at an apple that may be inappropriate, but somebody says, well, actually it should be, we should do a little more, we need to know more, we should be a little more severe in our accountability. I don't have anything that I can rest on. And so that's my question, because these are going to keep coming up, and they're going to keep coming up, and I don't want it to be staff says this. Yeah, that sounds okay, but me as a commissioner, I'm a little disturbed by that, but I can't hear why you as the staff said what you said. So I would just need a little more balance in the rationale if possible. and so that we have something to go on rather than, yeah, it was a pretty good recommendation by the staff, but something in my gut tells me no, so I'm gonna vote no, versus, let me hear what your thinking was, which might make me go one way or the other. So thank you for listening to me on that one.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner.
So that was a question actually to our
for the enforcement director to respond.
Yeah, yeah, that was a question in a soliloquy, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. I heard the question, and I appreciate the quandary you find yourself in. I'm just also aware that Deputy City Attorney Shen is on camera, which leads me to believe he has something he wants to offer.
Certainly, I don't mean to interrupt you at all, Jeff or Commissioner Bell. I mean, Commissioner Bell, I think you're raising really great questions, but I do just want to sort of first off the bat highlight, I think we're kind of segueing away from sort of the matter at hand into a more general enforcement discussion, which we can certainly have at a later date. But responding to your question, Commissioner Bell, I certainly understand the desire of the commissioners, of course, not to simply be a rubber stamp for what's presented to it at these meetings. And I also understand, Jeff, what Jeff was articulating about making sure there's an appropriate balance of roles and respecting due process. There are a few options that do come to mind about how we can sort of facilitate communication in a way that respects due process, but also allows the commission to perform its oversight role in an adequate way. And if you don't mind, I can certainly get, before the next meeting or a future meeting, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to some of my colleagues in the city attorney's office, get together with Jeff and his team, and maybe come up with some options about how to approach that issue in the future. So that's what I would propose, if you don't mind.
Okay, but for right now, we are dealing with what the hand we're dealt with at this point on this matter, on subject matter number 7.
Exactly. Certainly, I don't want to get ahead of the discussion. It seems like a couple of the commissioners have some hesitation about approving it as of today. So perhaps this is an item that will be continued. And I would also just note, as a matter of procedure, we still do want to invite public comment in this matter as well, since a couple of members of the public specifically asked to offer public comment.
Yeah.
On the item in more
okay.
detail.
I appreciate that. And it was a general question that came to me as we were trying to apply it to item number 7. So I appreciate what you said, and we can move on.
And there's certainly very important questions that we'll just need to return to at a later date. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm, the brief answer to Commissioner Bell's question is that we implemented, that we followed the program. But I think what we might do here is staff will elect to withdraw the proposal as of today, and either we will continue it to a subsequent meeting, or we will bring back a different proposal, depending on whatever staff determine. So I think if the chair is ready, we can make room for public comment.
Okay, do we need public comment? I think we do. So let's open up for public comment. The recommendation from the staff is to table this agenda item number 7. And the staff will report back to the commission at the next meeting, because we do need to, this has been going on for like 3+ years. So I think that we really need to really close the book on this one way or another. So yeah, can we have the staff's availability to make this a priority, that you will come back with the new proposal for the September meeting?
We will hope to do that,
okay.
Chair Lee. Thank you.
Okay, so let's open up for public comment. I don't think we need a vote on this. So let's open up for public comment.
Okay, and just to clarify, we are public comment on consent calendar item 7. Is that correct?
That's it, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on consent calendar item 7 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you joined the meeting earlier to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get back in line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It is important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. so it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently taking public comment on consent calendar item 7, proposed streamlined stipulation, decision, and order in the matter of Jennifer Stojkovic, SFEC complaint number 1920-011. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue.
Okay.
Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Commissioners, I brought it to your attention that the public needs to know the number 1-415-655-0001. And the ID number is 146-625-9397. And then you press the pound sign, and then you press the pound sign again, and then you enter the queue. Now, what is it that the moderator doesn't understand? How you're just telling people press *3, but they don't know about the number. And you know what is happening is, this is the Ethics Commission. You have to have a checklist. Under the Brown Act, you have to make it easy for the people to participate in the deliberations. But you all don't seem to get your act together. I told you very kindly that the number is not being run on the screen. The only other way to get it is to go on the internet and get it, but most people cannot get it. So I'm bringing to your attention, somebody needs to fix it as soon as possible. Because if there is no public comment and the ability is not given to the people to participate, the agenda item is null and void. Thank you very much.
Okay, please stand by.
So, moderator, I have a quick question. On
Yes.
my files, the call-in numbers are already included.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Basically, yeah, because they're at the beginning, once we started the meeting and once you referred it to me, yes, and I'll repeat it. Public comment will be available on each of the item of this agenda, and each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments. Yeah. We've already provided the telephone number and the access code at the beginning of the meeting. So, all right. We do have other callers in the queue. Please stand by. And we did get confirmation that the number and the access code is going to be displayed on SFGov TV. And it has been completed on their end to appear on. They did apologize that that was on their end. Thank you, SFGov TV. We do appreciate you very much. All right. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you very much. This is Anonymous again. I don't know anything about the facts or parties in this case, but I think the comments of Commissioner Bell are very important. And but there are ways to solve that even within this procedure. Since it is a stipulated agreement, why don't staff and the respondent here just stipulate to add more detail so that when this comes back, you can make that judgment. Even if you aren't allowed to know things that are not in the stipulated agreement using this process, why don't just the parties add more detail into the stipulation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Good morning, Commissioners. Again, I appreciate you severing item number 7 and hearing your comments on the matter and understand your concerns on this, because I have the same concerns as well. I would just like to ask for the Commission to request a full investigation, given the information raised by the previous caller. I think that Jennifer Stojkovic has been using SF City to hide activities from major tech companies around San Francisco. And I just think that now it's time to fully investigate and appreciate you doing your job as the Ethics Commission. Thank you.
Okay, please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no further callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, let's proceed to the regular agenda items. Now that we're done with the consent calendar, let's proceed to agenda item numbers 9, proposed stipulation, decision, and order in the matter of London Breed SFEC complaint number 1920-072.
Thank you, Chair Lee. I'm going to ask Senior Investigator Jeff Zumwalt, whose case this was, to address the commission on this matter.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Zumwalt. As a bit of background, this stipulated agreement was pulled from the consent calendar for discussion here at the meeting. So the commission has the option, or can discuss this publicly, and then can vote by majority to approve the stipulation. If it does not vote to approve the stipulation, we just ask that it provide feedback to us and not to re-explain what was just discussed in the last discussion, limited to discussing what's within the document.
Commissioner Bush, you have your hand up. Or should we open up to public comment first? Commissioner Bush?
Whatever the policy is.
I think it's entirely up to you, Chair Lee, but I believe past practice has been that typically the commission holds its discussion and then a motion is entertained, and after the motion has been seconded, at that point, the commission hears public comment, but you're welcome to do it in whatever order works for you.
I see Assistant City Attorney Shin's camera on.
Yeah, so just very briefly, Chair Lee. So Jeff is correct that you do have some flexibility in the order of how you want to approach each item. That is the historical practice as Jeff has described it. And I would say on this particular item, it may be helpful for the public actually to hear from the commissioners and their sort of concerns and questions before they weigh in as well. Okay. Just a suggestion. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Bush, you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Chair Lee. As I read what was submitted to us, it states that Mayor Breed brought this issue of a potential violation to the attention of the commission. But as I recall, the fact that there was, for example, payments for the floats, that was in the newspapers before any of this took place. Is that correct, that it was actually in the newspapers before you had the basis to begin an investigation?
Can you point me to where you're referring to, where it says that she brought it to our attention?
I can't pull it up at the same time I'm on with you. I'm not that adroit.
Okay. Well, you know, as is practice, we can't explain where the complaint came from or what timeline there was, just what is listed here in the document. So if there's something I can be referred to, I'd be happy to explain that further.
I suppose the broader question I have is that did this issue, well, yeah, if you can't comment, it puts me into an awkward situation. My recollection is that this issue surfaced first in the media, and it did so at least a year earlier than anything we've seen. Whether that's because you were going through a period when we were shut down most of the time. I mean, there's lots of good reasons why it would have taken a year, but I'm just trying to figure out whether or not this was something that was voluntarily brought by the mayor, or whether it surfaced because it had been pointed out as an issue. Also, it's my understanding that the underwriting for the float came from someone who is a city contractor. I'm not sure that that's referenced as an issue here, and that it also would have been underwritten in part by a corporation, the John Constantine's, and it would be prohibited for a corporation to make contributions. Can you comment on any of that?
So to the first point, I cannot comment on what the source of the allegations would have been. To the second, we would have investigated this for any violations of law. Any violations of law that were identified and agreed upon with the other party would have been included in the stipulation.
Based on what we just went through on item 7, it's my understanding that you cannot inform the commission of whether or not you all had a personal meeting with the mayor over these findings and the penalties?
I can only speak to the facts that are in the stipulation.
And is there a reason why that fact would not be in the stipulation?
It's agreed upon contract between us and the respondent, so we go back and forth over the language and material that's included in it.
I have to say I'm not comfortable not knowing whether or not the mayor took personal responsibility for any violation and made a personal commitment regarding how things will move forward in the future.
I will say that it was agreed upon. So it was agreed upon that there were 4 counts in violation of the law that she agreed to in the stipulation.
If I understand the process, though, her agreement is just affixing an internet signature. It does not involve necessarily an actual discussion and an actual statement unless you had put it in the stipulation. Is that correct?
It agrees to the violations of law as well as to pay the monetary penalty attached to it.
And is that penalty paid from her personal funds and is not eligible to be paid for out of campaign or other funds?
I don't believe the penalty has been paid yet, so I don't know how it's paid.
I apologize for jumping in, but I want to add just 2 things quickly. One is that, you know, as Senior Investigator Zumwalt has indicated, the stipulation includes language to which the respondent has agreed, and if the commission has an additional opportunity to review not only the exhibit but the front piece of the stipulation, what we typically refer to as the boilerplate, the paragraphs that rehearse the process. The respondent does in the boilerplate acknowledge the violations and take responsibility for those violations. Separately, the respondent in any matter can pay the penalty using any lawful means available to her. My understanding, based on representation, is that in this matter, the respondent may intend to pay personally, but any respondent can use lawful means, including committee monies.
But the stipulation could have said she would pay for it out of her personal funds, right?
It's not the practice of the commission to amend the boilerplate.
But it doesn't mean that you're precluded from doing so. Is that correct?
As a matter of practice, we do not amend the boilerplate.
If I could jump in, if I could ask the Assistant City Attorney, does the commission has the authority to direct folks how they would make their penalty payments? Is it within our purview? Can we do that?
Good morning, Chair Lee. So actually, on this subject, I can't quite tell, and maybe Jeff can sort of clarify for me, whether Mayor Breed has any representatives at today's meeting that could perhaps speak to some of Commissioner Bush's questions or the other commissioners' questions. Because I think a lot of these questions seem to be geared about how she or her representatives intend to proceed with this, and so maybe they're better placed to answer those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy City Attorney Shen. At one time this morning, the mayor's representative was on the attendee list. I don't see his name there now, but he may be there under a different name.
Yeah, and I would just say that the mayor's representative may be better placed than us to sort of speak to what the mayor's intentions are. I think, unfortunately, we can only speculate as to that.
If I may just add something to this conversation, I would like to acknowledge that the mayor has directed her staff to take the same ethics training that is required of commissioners and city department heads and elected officials. That's not a requirement. And so she has gone beyond what the requirements are to expand the filings by her staff to recognize what are the ethics rules. And that's my understanding that they would not be adverse to having those filings, including statements of economic interest, filed publicly with ethics the way others are. That's, I think, something that would be welcome, because the public could have an opportunity to see, like right now, you can't see who the chief of staff's financial interests are or whether they've taken the ethics training. But under the mayor's guidance, they are doing that, but they're just filing it at the mayor's office, and she has indicated, as I understand it, that she has no objection to having it filed publicly on the ethics page. So my questions are not designed to be a gotcha. They are designed to help understand how this process works and how we came to be where we are on it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. Commissioner Chu?
Thank you, Chair Lee. I have a question for our enforcement staff. And this also kind of intersects with the upcoming agenda item regarding gifts. And I'd like to understand and just get clarity about what the gift rules are that apply in San Francisco. There are the state rules that are in place, and then we have local rules, which can be more restrictive than the state rules. But I understand that the restricted source of definition under San Francisco rules or law defers to state law. So with regard to, I think it's count 2, the gift of the car repairs, what was the legal requirement with regard to her filing? Did she have to file local, San Francisco local rules or state law? And what are the differences between the two with regard to the disclosure requirements, if any?
Sure. So under the city law, it's prohibited to receive a gift from a subordinate. So that would just be a prohibitive gift that she would not have been allowed to have accepted. So since the gift was prohibited, I think that she shouldn't have even accepted it. So I don't know if there would have been any reporting requirement on top of that, since the gift shouldn't have been accepted in the first place.
Okay, thank you. So then the amendment that was filed in December of 2019 referencing the FCCP definition that would, is that an accurate interpretation? Like, is that applicable in this case at all? Or is there a conflict between the two laws?
I think that might be more of a policy question. I think that might be addressed in the next agenda item. This was just specifically the city's prohibition on receiving a gift from a subordinate.
Okay. Thank you. And then we have before us the amounts associated with each of the 4 counts. Are they what the statutory maximum for these violations, or are these a negotiated amount?
So as to count 1, that was the statutory maximum. Count 2, 3, and 4 were not, but they were the negotiated amounts based on what the charter allows us to assess for penalties for those violations.
And then to channel my fellow Commissioner Bell from the previous item that we had discussed, since there are limitations on what information about the investigation we can elicit in this setting. Could you speak to the rationale in how you came to these amounts for the different violations?
I was only loosely involved in the penalty amounts. My role was the investigation of this, but those decisions were made with in concert with the Enforcement Director Jeff Pierce, Executive Director Leanne Pelham, and respondent and respondent's counsel.
Perhaps Mr. Pierce, you could weigh in.
I can also add just quickly, we did review analogous cases, the kind of the standard thing that we will do, look at severity of the activity. So there is a method that we do go through as far as determining the appropriate penalty amount.
Okay, if we could have a little background on that, that would be helpful. And I would also note, just as an aside, not to get into it deeper here, but the contributions that were solicited for the Pride Parade, that was 6 years ago. It was over 6 years ago, and this was her committee to run for supervisor from 2012. So that's like 9 years ago, and I just think that it's incumbent upon the commission to be timely and expeditious in investigations, because it's the effectiveness and the impact and the deterrent effect of this, it's attenuated. And I think that this is important, and I'm glad that it is before us now, but I would have loved to have had this come before us much sooner, and dealt with in such a way. And I'm hoping that with the streamlined processes that we have in place, that this will be the last time we have to wait for 6 years to resolve a violation of any magnitude. So with that, Mr. Pierce, would love to hear a little bit more about how staff came to these dollar amounts.
If I could interject, under the penalty assessment, in one of the exhibits, you highlighted the 7 areas that you used to determine the penalty. So can you go over each of these 7 items and how you came up with whether the maximum or portion of the penalty? Because I'm really puzzled by number 7. The respondent's ability to pay is a factor. in determining the amounts.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Lee and Commissioner Chu. You know, as Senior Investigator Zumwalt has said, these are negotiated penalties. And although we try to peg penalties to prior analogous cases, ultimately we have to come to an agreement with every individual respondent about how to resolve a matter. The particular considerations that staff used or that respondent and their counsel might have used to reach that agreement remain confidential as settlement communications. The 7 factors that you've identified, Chair Lee, are identified in our regulations. So they are considerations that we apply in every instance, whether in a settlement or in a hearing on the merits. And as to factor 7, I'll clarify just one thing, which is that the respondent's ability to pay really goes to considerations that the Commission has brought to us historically in the context of the number of accounts that are lingering at the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue. So the Commission as a whole is invested in making sure that when we assess penalties, we collect penalties. And so we don't, as a matter of course, wish to assess penalties that are impossible to collect.
Thank you for the explanation. Commissioner Bush, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair Lee. If I understood, that sounds like it's a little bit at odds. If a penalty can be paid from any legal source of funding, then it really wouldn't matter if they can afford to pay it out of their own pocket, because they could pay it from a campaign committee or a nonprofit. Let's say it was be paid for by the Sister City Committee or something like that. Isn't that correct? So the relevance of ability to pay is not really tied to the financial capacity of the person who's facing the penalty. Is that right?
Well, I want to channel Deputy City Attorney Shen here a little bit and make sure that we speak directly to this agenda item and not have a broader policy or process conversation about how the Commission arrives at penalties. But I'll clarify again that a respondent can pay a penalty out of any lawful source, and there are instances where having a third party pay the penalty amounts to an unlawful payment. There are instances in which a respondent is positioned only to pay the penalty out of private funds because that's the only lawful source available to that respondent.
What would be an example of that?
Commissioner Bush, I don't know that we want to run as far afield. I'm seeing Deputy City Attorney Shen arriving again.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Jeff. I just do feel like it would be more useful to sort of advance this discussion if we could sort of tell if the mayor's representative is on the line. I don't see his name on the list of attendees, but perhaps he is called in. Ronald, do you mind sort of inquiring or asking people who are to sort of keep their hand up if they're here appearing on behalf of the mayor on this item? Again, that may sort of help advance this discussion.
It looks like we have 3 callers in the queue, but these are.
Let me double check. I'm going to reach out to Respondents Council. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, and if possible, I'd really appreciate this cooperation from the public. If you are not here on behalf of the mayor as the mayor's legal representative, if you could please put your hand down. You still will have the opportunity to offer public comment on this item, of course. But we are interested in seeing the mayor's representative is on the line to help answer some of the Commission's questions.
Andrew, it looks like we have one. I don't know if this individual heard you or they could have been away.
Okay.
I'm in touch with Respondents Council, and he has indicated that, yes, he is one of the callers with his hand raised. I'll try to figure out which one.
I think I know which one it is, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Hold on just 1 second. Hold on just 1 second, please.
Thank you, Ronald.
Hello, caller. Are you a mayor's representative?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Tom Willis, and I represent the mayor. I apologize. I've been in the WebEx, and literally when this item called, my internet went down. My sincere apologies for that. I just want to, if I could just on behalf of the mayor, make just one or two very brief comments, and then maybe just respond to one or two of these questions. First of all, I want to directly say to the commission on behalf of the mayor that she has acknowledged her mistakes that are set forth in this settlement, and she has taken full responsibility for them, and she takes full responsibility for them. And that was what she said in her public comments about this. She said also at that time that she has learned a lot from these events, and that she believes she will be a better public servant because of it. And then she also stated, and I'm just reiterating this, but she emphasized, I think to Commissioner Bush's point and others, that the Ethics Commission fulfills an important function in enforcing these laws and in applying them fairly to everyone. And, you know, this settlement is fair. It is, these fines assessed are significant and are more significant in some respects than in other, for other activity in the past that the commission has assessed. So they are very significant, just to respond to that. So I do request on behalf of the mayor to respectfully approve this proposal and reiterate that she has taken full responsibility for this, not only to Mr. Pierce's point in the stipulation, which requires her to say that, but she has said that, you know, publicly to the broad public. So with that in mind, I think there was a question about, you can still hear me, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. I don't have an answer on how the mayor will pay for this in response to that question. I think as you know, Jeff Pierce mentioned, in the past, I think, you know, office holders use personal funds or office holder accounts, but I don't know the answer to how the mayor is going to proceed. The goal here was to, you know, obviously agree to this and move forward and see if the commission would approve it. And I don't know if there was another question, but I'm happy to respond to any questions.
I think that was the main question, the source of Eamonn. But as the Deputy City Attorney and the Enforcement Director had said, the fund, regardless of where it is, has to be a legal fund, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
From a legal source, I meant. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And I can't think of an instance where a kind of a third-party nonprofit could pay for that, but again, it would be. I just can't. I can't think of a situation where that would apply.
Okay. Commissioner Bush, your hand is still up. Are you done? Okay. So let's open up.
I'll take it down.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions to the mayor's representative, Mr. Willis, let's open up for public comment.
I was trying to get my mouse over there quick enough to put my hand up. Okay. But if I might, Chair Lee,
please.
While we have the mayor's representative on the phone, I was wondering, sir, if you could speak to this opportunity for the Ethics Commission to use the mayor's cooperation to use this process, whether folk think that it is severe enough or not severe enough, or that she has or not taken personal responsibility. I'm just wondering if you are in a position to speak to the ability or the opportunity for the Ethics Commission to use this situation, this event, as a way to more broadly strengthen and utilize our orientation to city employees and others in like-minded positions about the responsibilities of their positions. And so I don't know if you can answer it directly, but it's something that I think that the mayor with the bully pulpit might be able to say, I didn't know, I made a mistake, and others may be similarly situated, and use that bully pulpit to try to increase awareness about the requirements that this commission often has to enforce.
Yes, am I on?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a very good point. I just want to point out, I want to be careful here because I represent the mayor in her personal capacity, obviously, not in her official capacity. So that would be, I think you're speaking about using her, official position to encourage city employees to take additional training or to highlight the facts of these gift rules and their limitations and exceptions. So I completely, I hear the statement. I just want to be careful tonight. I can't speak on behalf of the mayor in her official capacity.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
I didn't mean to put you in that position.
Yeah, but leaving that aside, I do want to respond because I think it's a very good question, which is, she thought it was very important to state publicly that she took responsibility for this and that she stand up and state that and state the importance of the Ethics Commission's duties, which she has done not just in signing the stipulation, but in her public comments about it, specifically directed to this stipulation. So
I appreciate it.
I think that speaks to her, the way she views this.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more comments from my colleagues, so let's open up for public comments, please.
Herlihy, I'm sorry. I couldn't get my.
You're not on my screen. I don't know why. Sorry.
No, I was late on the hand. Before we move to public comment, I would just like to move to approve make a motion to approve the stipulation as presented to us by staff.
Second.
Public comments?
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you've just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of Agenda Item 9, proposed stipulation, decision, and order in the matter of London Breed, SFEC complaint number 1920-072. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You'll hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
So, Commissioners, I've been listening intently to this deliberation. I wanted to mention early on, but I couldn't, that Attorney Ambrose, I've known her for many years, is somebody that could have shed light on this discussion in a better way. What I see here is that we have a mayor who's made statements in a manner that is nonchalant. In other words, what the mayor has been saying is that she wasn't fully aware of the actions. But now that she is aware of them, she is sorry and she will not repeat them. But you commissioners have to do a needs assessment. And it begins with the salary of the mayor, which in the middle of the pandemic was increased to $400,000. Find out if that is the right figure, $400,000. As far as we know, from reading in the newspaper, the cap on this stipulation is $23,000. So why all the fuss? If I'm making $400,000, I can easily pay to $23,000. There's no need for me to go begging anybody to cover up or pay my fees or the fine or the stipulation or whatever the gentleman has been saying. In the past also, the gentleman, the investigator, has been, he wants to stick to what he wants to reveal. But the public knows more than the Ethics Commission. And we are very glad that we have Mr. Larry Bush, who is asking the right questions so that we have a process. And one of the most important processes or checklists is whenever we are discussing something like this, somebody has to be there, like the mayor's representative who gave an excuse that his internet went down and I don't know what.
Thank you, caller. Your 3 minutes has expired. Please stand by. Okay. Thank you, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you very much. Good morning again. This is Anonymous once more. So I'd like to point you to paragraph 7 of the penalty assessment. I think some of you are wondering where it says this. In paragraph 7 of the penalty assessment, it says, quote, in mitigation, Breed voluntarily reported the gifts, and that's referring to the Nuru gifts regarding the car breakdown. And on that count 4, staff stipulates to an $8,292 penalty, which is a 1.5 multiplicative factor, I believe, times the value of that gift, $5,528. I don't think that you should accept that this, quote, mitigating factor is a mitigating factor. She reported these gifts after the person giving the gifts was arrested by the FBI, and she denied in that public post on her Medium page responsibility due to the state law exception for close personal friendships. And that should not be a mitigating factor. So just on this very detailed document, you should increase the count 4 multiplicative factor from 1.5 to something else, possibly 3. And that is how I would suggest changing your stipulation. The fact that these other people, it looks like you're already using the 3 factor for some of these other counts, but on that one, the fact that it's 1.5 does not make sense. These people like Nick Bovis and John Constant, Nick Bovis has been arrested himself. John Constant has asked for various favors, and London Breed has provided those. Not necessarily that that's illegal in and of itself, but you can see what influence Constant has, and I have provided citations through public records. And finally, you should investigate the Walter Wong, London Breed, and 2020 Chinese New Year parade float and how the funding for that involves the San Francisco Shanghai Sister City Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Okay, we do have one other caller in the queue, but the hand's been raised up, and I think Tom, the representative for the mayor, this is you that has your hand up. Tom, did you want to make any public comment?
No, I apologize. I didn't realize I still had my hand up.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much. We just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. All right, please stand by. Madam Chair, there are no further callers in the queue.
Okay, so the public comment is closed for this agenda item number 9. I have a motion to approve. Motion made by Commissioner Chu, seconded by Commissioner Bell. Any further discussion?
I'm not sure what the protocol is on this, but I would like us, in the process of considering this, to acknowledge that the mayor is having her staff do economic disclosure and ethics training, and to welcome her taking a further step of having that posted publicly through the ethics page as one part of what Commissioner Bell is raising, which is to provide a level of leadership that is an example to city officials.
So
I don't know if that can be
maybe the motion. Oh, my apologies.
I'm not sure if that can be appended in some way. It's not part of the stipulation. I understand that. But can it go as a letter with our finding, or in some other way go on the public record that we've taken that step?
Well, we have
that the commission wants to do it.
We can either have the motion maker amend her motion to add the one, or let's listen to our deputy city attorney.
Yeah, Chair Lee, if you don't mind, I'm not entirely sure what the proposal is on the table, and it does seem to be rather distinct from the stipulation at hand. So we probably do want to call the roll on Commissioner Chu's motion. And then sounds like, honestly, Commissioner Bush, that you are bringing up a matter that may be an item for a future meeting. I'm not sure if that directly relates to the sort of enforcement matter that's before us right now.
I think if we separate it to another meeting, it loses its heft, since this is about the mayor's compliance with ethics laws, and as she says in her own statement, that she's become more aware of it. She's doing steps to see that her staff becomes more aware of it. As we are all aware, one of our staff has already been criminally prosecuted for failing to comply with ethics laws. So I think that slow walking it to another meeting is not the right answer.
Can I make a proposal? Can we vote on the motion on the table, which is to approve this stipulation, and in response to Commissioner Bush's comment to highlight the mayor's directive to her own staff, maybe that's something that the staff can do separately that would not require commission action because it's not on the agenda item. So can we just vote on the motion on the table first, and then we can hear Director Pelham on your recommendation? Commissioner Bush, would that be agreeable to you?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay.
Or, Commissioner Lee and Deputy City Attorney, would it be possible if I amended my motion to note that I move to approve the settlement as presented by staff regarding the 4 counts brought against the mayor, and that in so doing, we also note and affirm her public acknowledgement of responsibility and her direction to her staff to file Form 700 and undertake the ethics trainings, and anything else that Commissioner Bush would like to add, and do it that way so that it's encompassed within the motion itself.
I like that.
Deputy?
Sure. Why don't we go ahead and proceed with that motion?
Okay, so I then put forward that amended motion.
I second it.
Okay, let's call the roll.
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Chair Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
With 4 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It is now 11:30, and we have a couple of major items still coming up. So let's take a 5-minute break.
Chair Lee, may I just follow up with one item to follow up on the request you made?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, just in response to Commissioner Bush's query and Commissioner Chu's amendment that has just been discussed, I think one way to acknowledge the feedback that you've been providing or questions you have about the mayor's apparent direction to her staff to take ethics training and so forth, we can certainly follow up with the mayor's office to get more information about that. I understand that came in yesterday through an email perhaps from her staff. But we do, as you know, issue press releases about enforcement matters the commission has undertaken. And that is once we can confirm a bit more of the details so we have a greater understanding of those facts. Happy to include that in the press release acknowledging that those steps have been taken. But that's a tool that we use to make sure that we are telling the public about the enforcement matters the commission has resolved and the way in which you've been resolving them. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
That's great. Okay. So let's take a, excuse me. Let's take a 10-minute break, meet back here at 11:40.
Great.
All right, I will be putting this in practice mode, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
13th San Francisco Ethics Commission meeting, and we are now on agenda item number 10. But before I proceed, let's remind the public that if they want to offer the public comment, they should dial in to the number that is on your screen, and the moderator will proceed to call on you when the public comment period is open. So with that, we are on agenda item number 10, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action and findings and recommendation on a long-awaited report on gifts to individuals. And before we turn it over to Mr. Pat Ford, I want to commend the director and her staff of putting together a very thorough, well thought out, well-researched document for us to digest today. So with that, let's proceed with Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Hello, commissioners. This is Pat Ford, Senior Policy and Legislative Affairs Counsel, and with me is Michael Canning, our policy analyst. Thank you for your kind words. Chair Lee, it was definitely a office-wide effort. We had people in every division helping us, so much of that thanks is owed to lots of people around the office. So I can't even name them all. Many people had a hand on this. And Ronald, if you could, do you mind passing the presenter role to me so I can share my screen? Thank you. So I'm going to share a few slides to just help prime the discussion. I know this is a pretty lengthy and content-heavy report, so I thought I would briefly hit on some of the highlights here just to help you begin your discussion. And then I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have after that. You should be able to see my screen now.
That is correct.
Great, thanks, Ronald. So I want to put this report in context. It's a long project, and this report is one of multiple reports. I just want to remind you and the public kind of where we are in the progress of this project. So the first report to come out of this project, which is a project reviewing the city's ethics and conflicts of interest rules, the first report was delivered in November of 2020, and that report focused on behested payments, which are payments made at the request of a city official or employee to some third party. And back in November, the commission approved some legislative recommendations in that report. Those recommendations are still pending before the board, and we have still not gotten a hearing date on that ordinance. So that ordinance has now been pending for about 9 months. The last word that I've gotten is that hopefully we'll get the first Rules Committee hearing after Labor Day when the board returns from recess. I will keep you updated, but that is the status of that first report. The report that's before you today is the first of 2 reports talking about gifts. And this report specifically talks about gifts to individuals. So this is a gift from some third party directly to a city official or employee. The next report that we'll bring you is a little different. It'll talk about gifts that go through city departments before they get to city officers or employees. And the final phase of the project will be kind of a miscellaneous phase of things that we know we want to look at that don't necessarily warrant a full standalone report. So things that aren't vested payments or gifts, but that still are definitely relevant to this project we will put in the third phase. So some background about the project in general, especially about gifts as well. Just to set the stage, this project was initiated after the federal government started bringing criminal charges against city officials, employees, and contractors. In particular, 2 department heads and additional city employee were charged. The department heads, of course, are Mohammed Nuru and Harlan Kelly. 8 individuals have agreed to plead guilty to the criminal charges brought by the Department of Justice. And most recently, there were local criminal charges brought by the San Francisco District Attorney against another former city employee relating to violations of ethics laws. And to date, 6 city officials and employees have resigned or been terminated, either because they were charged or because they were somehow related to some of the allegations. So just to set the stage, a significant number of people in high-level positions with the allegations of ethics problems. Also, to help provide some context, I just want to quickly reiterate what the restricted source rule is. So the restricted source rule is a local gift law that says that city officials and employees cannot accept gifts from restricted sources. And that's, of course, subject to some exceptions, which you will have read about in the report, quite a few exceptions. We'll talk about them today as well. A restricted source can be one of 2 things. Restricted source is either someone who's doing or seeking to do business with the department of the city official or employee in question, or someone who has sought to influence that official or employee in some way. That could be a lobbyist who has contacted them, maybe a client of a lobbyist who's paid the lobbyist to contact that official, a permit consultant, or somebody who's just contacted them and tried to influence their action in some way, but it's not a lobbyist contact. It's a fairly broad definition. So that's what the restricted source rule is. And in the federal complaints that I mentioned a moment ago, we can see facts alleged there that seem to indicate restricted source rule violations. Many of them come in the form of free meals and alcohol. We see that in most, if not all, of the federal complaints involve at least some allegation of somebody who is likely a restricted source providing free food or drinks to a city official or employee. So that's a really common one. Another one that you see is travel costs for trips. Some more notable ones that we saw: a $30,000 watch, a $40,000 tractor, and $250,000 of construction services, including materials and labor. So all of these, if the allegations are true, appear to have been from restricted sources, so they would violate that rule. So what we are seeing from the federal complaints and why we devoted a report specifically to gift rules is that we can see a wide variety and intensity of what appear to be restricted source rule violations. To try to determine whether or not these were isolated incidents or whether they are indicative of a broader problem throughout the city organization. We did kind of a novel approach of taking a sample of Form 700 filings and doing a deep dive on them to see if we could see any other apparent restricted source violations. So we chose 6 departments that were related in some way to the federal corruption allegations. Either they had officials that were arrested, or they were issuing permits to some of the contractors who were arrested, but in some way there was a connection. So we chose 6 departments, and we looked at all the individuals in those departments who file their Form 700s electronically. And again, those are just commissioners, department heads, and elected officials. Most city employees file on paper. Those are not easily accessible, so we were not able to review them in a comprehensive way. As you know, we're transitioning to e-filing, but we have not arrived at that yet. So we looked only at the e-filers, so only the high-level officials, and we looked at the gifts that they had reported. And then using public documents, we tried to see if any of the sources of those gifts appeared like they might be restricted sources. And in fact, we did find that 6 individuals appear to have reported gifts that may have been from restricted sources. And some examples of those are an official was reported by a lobbyist, or was reportedly contacted by a lobbyist, and we see that in the lobbyist disclosures, and subsequently accepted a gift from that lobbyist. That lobbyist would be a restricted source for attempting to influence that official. There's of course also the separate gift against, or separate rule against lobbyist gifts, but in this case, this is not an elected official. Separately, an official reported receiving dinner and a piece of apparel from an entity when that entity was seeking to become a contractor with that department, which makes them likely a restricted source. And additionally, appears that that entity had likely sought to influence the department regarding that contract. So again, that's another indicator of being a restricted source. Another example, we saw an official report receiving tickets from an entity that was doing business and pursuing additional business with that department. So again, both indicators of a restricted source. The point of this review was not to specifically identify these people and try to pursue violations against them. The point was to try to determine whether or not this is a broad phenomenon. And I think based on our sample, we concluded that it's an issue. It definitely shows us that the restricted source rule needs to be strengthened, and that's what we sought to do through this project. One last slide on background to give you some more context. This is just global data about all gifts reported by electronic filers. So again, commissioners, electeds, department heads during an 8-year period from 2013 to 2020. There's 8 reporting years. And this is all the gifts that were reported. They tally up to just under $900,000. And you can see that travel makes up a large portion of the gifts by value. Tickets, meals, and events make up a large portion of the gifts in terms of the number of the gifts. So this is just to give you an idea of the scope of gifts that are being reported and generally where they fall in terms of type and value. And keep in mind that these are gifts that are reportable. So gifts that fall under an exception would not appear here. They would not be reported. So a gift from a close family member like your spouse would not be reported. These are just reportable gifts. So moving on to our approach to this project, the goals that we were trying to achieve by reviewing gift rules. First, to reduce the danger of undue influence. To talk about the restricted source rule again, the main point of that rule is to make sure that people who are seeking favorable outcomes from city officials are not giving gifts because that has a danger of causing undue influence and affecting that person's judgment. So that's one of the main things we sought to do through this project, is to really make sure that the rules are living up to this goal of reducing that danger. Also, we wanted to prevent opportunities for bribes. So bribe is kind of a higher level of a gift problem where there's an actual intent to influence a government decision. When a gift is given with the intent to influence, that's a bribe. Restricted source rule, there doesn't have to be the intent to influence. It's just the person who's giving the gift meets one of those categories of being a restricted source, either a contractor or somebody who's seeking to influence that official, then they can't give a gift. But we believe that a gift from a restricted source is often a channel for a bribe. And I think that's confirmed by the federal allegations that a lot of those restricted sources who were giving gifts did in fact intend to influence official actions, and those folks were charged with bribery. We also wanted to try to improve organizational culture. There's been a lot of talk about the tone at the top. You see that in the controller's reports. We agree that that's a really important part of addressing the ethical issues that we see in the city, is improving our organizational culture. And we think having really strong and really clear gift rules is a huge part of that. And of course, restoring the public trust. I think all of these top 3 bullets go towards that, is that's really what is at stake here, is do the people of the city trust the city government? I think we need to do everything we can to build that trust. Our approach in achieving these goals consisted largely of trying to eliminate loopholes in gift rules. Again, seeking to make rules strong, make them robust, eliminate loopholes that can be exploited that undermine the purposes of the rules. Also, we wanted to make the rules much more clear. Rules that have a long list of exceptions can be very confusing, and they can actually undermine people's confidence or how seriously they take the rules. So we wanted to make the rules very strong and very clear. Although these are not parts of this policy project, since we're just focusing on the laws themselves, I do want to highlight that education and enforcement will always be a part of any renewed focus on any area of the law. So if the commission decides to move forward with some of the legislative recommendations that we'll talk about in a moment, education and enforcement around those rules will absolutely be a part of our office-wide approach. But I don't talk about them in the report since we're just focusing on the laws themselves. So with that, I'll move ahead and talk about the actual recommendations. So in the report, I break down the recommendations into 6 separate recommendations. And then at the end of the report, I tried to provide you with a list of each specific change that those recommendations would entail, each change to the law. And I separated them by regulation changes and ordinance legislative changes. So that will help you kind of see what would be involved legislatively in terms of moving those recommendations forward. And I also hope that it would facilitate your discussion and any motions that you may want to make. But today, in this slide deck, I kept this organized by the 6 sections that are in the report, which I think this is kind of just an easier way to approach these by theme. So the first one is to remove many of the state law exceptions that currently affect the restricted source rule. And I think this goes to a question that Commissioner Chu asked during a previous agenda item. And she's correct that as I discussed in the report, as we discussed in the report, the restricted source rule uses the definition of gift that's set forth in state law in the California Government Code, the Political Reform Act. And that definition is subject to a long list of exceptions. And when we went through and closely scrutinized each exception, we concluded that it's inappropriate to apply many of them to the restricted source rule. For one, those exceptions were not created with the restricted source rule in mind. They were created for purposes of Form 700 reporting and for the $520 annual gift limit under state law. They're state exceptions, so they were thinking of state laws when they created them, they being the Fair Political Practices Commission. When you try and apply some of those restrictions to, or exceptions to the restricted source rule, they either don't make sense, some of them just literally, they don't apply, they don't make sense, or they result in what we believe is a negative policy outcome. And in fact, they undermine the purposes of the rule. So there's a chart in the report that goes through each of them and specifies which one staff recommends removing and which ones retaining. I won't go through those right now because there are too many of them, but glad to talk about any of them, answer any questions that you might have. And also just to clarify, when I say remove them, we can't remove them from state law, but what we can do is create a local definition of gift within the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code that simply leaves those exceptions out. So by defining gift in our own law, we as a city can decide what we consider to be a gift and therefore what we apply the restricted source rule to. We've already done that with the gifts from subordinates rule that was done back in 2004. And for whatever reason, that same step has not been taken for the restricted source rule. So that's what we're proposing be done now. Second recommendation also involves exceptions to the restricted source rule, but here we're talking about the local exceptions. So in addition to those state law exceptions that are in the state regs talking about the definition of gift, we also have local exceptions that are in at the Ethics Commission regulations. We took a close look at each of those exceptions, and we found that the exceptions create opportunities for abuse, that many of them also undermine the purposes of the restricted source rule. In particular, there are a number of exceptions that involve free meals. One of them allows restricted sources to provide unlimited free food and drink to city employees as long as it is shared inside of a city office. And we did not find that to be a convincing rationale to allow an exception to the restricted source rule. So we recommend that that exception be removed. Likewise, there are 3 separate exceptions that allow certain departments to accept free meals from certain members of industries. So in particular, there are exceptions for the port and the airport to accept free meals from certain representatives of certain companies that they may at some time do business with. And a similar exception allows for free meals from representatives of the financial services industry. And again, we did not find that that was a convincing rationale to allow city employees to accept what would otherwise be restricted source gifts. We found that the controller's accounting policies allow for departments to reimburse employees for business-related meals. And we found that that would likely be a sufficient channel for employees to get reimbursed for meals if in fact they need to attend a meal as part of their job duties. That's a much better and sounder way to pay for those meals than to have the restricted source pay for them, because that clearly creates the same kind of danger of undue influence that the rule was created to prevent. Likewise, there's an exception for periodic small gifts. The exception allows 4 gifts per year up to $25. We tried to dig into what that was there for, and we believe that it's too broad to serve the purpose that it's there for. The purpose appears to be allowing employees who do business with vendors to accept some kind of small routine items from them. Like if they go on site to accept a muffin or a bottle of water or a pad of paper or something just while they're at a meeting. So we think that that exception should be much more narrowly tailored to just allow for that. The third recommendation is to ensure that the restricted source rule applies broadly, meaning to lots of different circumstances where restricted source rules or restricted source gifts are at play. And specifically, we think it's important to prohibit the giving of a restricted source gift. So actually prohibit the restricted source from giving a gift. You see that principle already present in the lobbyist gift rule. Not only may the elected official not accept the gift, the lobbyist may not make the gift. Likewise, you see that in the campaign finance context. Certain contributions can't be accepted by candidates, and it's also unlawful for the person in question to give the contribution. We think that same principle should be added to the restricted source rule, that will make the rule much stronger and more enforceable. Similarly, we think that the use of intermediaries to launder gifts should be explicitly prohibited. There may already be some regulations that could be brought in to try and achieve this purpose, but we think it's much better to explicitly state it in the code. One, so that it's just much clearer and easier to enforce, but also just to really clearly communicate that to people, that you can't give a gift to somebody and have them pass it on to a city officer since you're a restricted source, that would also be a violation. Likewise, we think it's important to prohibit city officials and employees from acting as that intermediary. So really trying to close that loophole so that intermediaries don't undermine the rule. And lastly, we think it's important to prohibit gifts to family members. So if a gift to a city officer would be a restricted source gift, a gift to that officer's spouse should also be a restricted source gift. That principle also already present in the lobbyist gift rule. fourth recommendation is to clarify how the restricted source rule applies to those who do business with the city. So as I mentioned earlier, a contractor doing business or seeking to do business with an official's department is a restricted source. But we think it's important to clarify a few things. For one, define what a contract is. Define what a contract proposal is. I know these seem like basic concepts, but they're actually not explicitly spelled out in the law. That is done, again, in the campaign finance context. If you look at the contractor contribution rule, that rule very clearly spells out what it means to be a city contractor, what it means to bid on a contract, to submit a proposal. It's important to have those same concepts present here so that we can benefit from that clarity. Similarly, what does it mean to be a permit applicant? We think it's important to specify that someone who applies for a permit or a license also becomes a person doing business, a restricted source. Similarly, we think it's important to clarify how the restricted source rule applies to individuals who are associated with an entity that is a restricted source. So if some corporation is doing business with a department, we think it's important to clarify that major shareholders, directors, and officers of that corporation are themselves restricted sources. Otherwise, someone could argue that they can give a restricted source because they're not a city contractor, their wholly owned subsidiary, their corporation is a city contractor. So we think it's good to explicitly spell out for people that that's not the case, that the rule does in fact apply to those individuals. And again, that's already done in the campaign finance context with the contractor contribution rule. We propose doing the same thing here with the restricted source rule. The fifth recommendation is to reform the exceptions to the subordinate gift rule. I haven't talked about this rule yet, but it's been discussed earlier today in a prior agenda item. The subordinate gift rule prohibits city officials and employees from accepting gifts from their subordinates. So it's people who report to them or who are applying for a job that reports to them. And like the restricted source rule, there are also exceptions to the subordinate gift rule contained in the Ethics Commission's regulations. We reviewed these. We didn't find as many issues with these exceptions, but we do think it's important to just make them clearer, consolidate them to a certain extent. I think some of them are a little duplicative, so I think we could consolidate some of those exceptions and clarify them. They state certain occasions when it's okay for a subordinate to give a gift, or I should say when it's okay for the official to accept the gift from the subordinate. We think it's important to really drill down and make it explicit what those occasions are so that folks know what's okay and what's not. Similarly, there should be a dollar limit imposed on the gift. There shouldn't be an open-ended exception. It should allow for a gift only up to a certain amount so that it is essentially, it's possible to make a gesture to your boss, but not to give a gift that would undermine the purpose of the rule. Lastly, we recommend that gifts from permit expediters to officials and employees in permit issuing departments be prohibited. So I've mentioned the lobbyist gift rule. Lobbyists are prohibited from giving gifts to elected officials. Similarly, a permit expediter or permit consultant is regulated like a lobbyist. They're somebody who's a professional influencer. They're hired by a client to contact city officials or employees to try and seek beneficial outcomes for their client. So we think the same policy underlying the lobbyist gift rule would justify creating a permit consultant gift rule. So essentially that would say a permit consultant shall not give a gift to an official or employee in one of those permit issuing departments, like for example, the Department of Building Inspection or the Department of Public Works. And we think that that rule should be modeled on the lobbyist gift rule. So it should include all the same components that the lobbyist gift rule has. So that concludes the recommendations. I just wanted to leave you with this segment out of section 3.200, which is the section that has the findings and purpose of the government ethics ordinance. It's the chapter that contains all the conflict of interest rules. It says government decisions of officers and employees of the city and county should be and should appear to be made on a fair and impartial basis. And this was something that really animated our approach to this project, was not just that conflict of interest rules and specifically gift rules should try to eliminate conflicts, but they should also eliminate the appearance of conflicts. Again, since we're trying to build the public trust, we want to communicate to the public that our gift rules are really strong and strict, and not having a bunch of exceptions, so that decisions appear to be, not just are made impartially, but appear to be made impartially. So just wanted to share that, since that's something that was really front of mind for us. So I will turn back my presenter powers to Ronald. I'm glad to answer any questions that you might have. And also, Chair Lee, just wanted to let you know that we do have Kevin Cohn, who's the CFO at the airport here. And I think he has some comments about some of the recommendations. So I'll leave it to you how you want to lead the discussion, but just wanted to let you know that he's here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ford. I must say, excuse me, this has been a project of long much sweat and tears. Many of us has attended numerous consultation meetings that you had held with the stakeholders, and they have made excellent recommendations. So in addition to these public consultations, I know that the staff has consulted with your colleagues across the country, and it's truly reflected the deliberations that you have put in to this report. So the reason why I asked if someone from the Airport Commission was going to be present, because with your numerous recommendations, one seems to jump out, which is different from your other recommendations. So I would hold that off until my colleagues had the chance to comment on this report, and they might have bring up the same things too. So let's open up for discussion among our colleagues. Commissioner Chu, your hand is up.
I'm sorry, that was from before. I will still collecting my thoughts.
Okay. Commissioner Bush.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent report, one of the best I've seen from staff in some time, and also very educational for all of us. I had a few questions that I wanted to ask about exceptions to the gift rules. Do the gift rules apply primarily to things that have a financial value? I'm thinking, for example, of a city official who was gifted stock options under friends and family. But because the stock options had not yet been realized, and he didn't intend to realize them until he left office, but nevertheless, they were gifted at a certain value and later on would have much more value. Are those covered in this, in your rules there?
This, the definition of gift uses the word payment. So that's kind of the starting point, is payment. And that's a term of art under state law. I would guess that giving stock options, yes, would constitute a payment. How to value that, or how the vesting schedule or maturity of the stock options affects how and when that becomes a gift, I can't say right now, but yes, they definitely would fall in some way within the scope of gift rules, just as they do with financial reporting when you report on the Form 700.
And I don't think it gets reported on the Form 700. So, but it goes to the issue that you said earlier about that it appears to be fair. And so stock options don't appear to be fair, even if they are fair within the limits of the law. I'm not sure what the rules are. I know that when this took place before, the city attorney ruled that it was not a gift because it was not yet realized. And I'm just wondering if that advice is still the case today.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have to look into that.
Also, when it comes to things like hotel room upgrades and so forth, is there a cap on how much can be given as a gift in that regard?
I think the answer to that question depends on whether or not a gift constitutes a gift of travel. So there's a distinction in state law between gifts that are gifts of travel, specific kinds of gifts of travel. So if you're traveling to give a speech or to do certain kinds of training or job-related educational things, it's still a gift if somebody pays for that, but it's not subject to the annual limit. So I think the answer to your question depends on whether or not that would be part of travel and accommodation expenses that falls within that exception. If it does, likely no limit. If it does not fall within that, then the limit should apply.
Should we consider establishing a limit similar to the federal cap on travel?
Are you talking about like a per diem?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that that's something that would go within our law. I know the controller's office already has policies about per diems. They have a really lengthy accounting policies manual that talks about all that. So I think they already have those rules.
But that's just something that they've adopted for themselves. It does not apply to city officials who travel on a sister city trip to Paris, for example, and accept helicopter rides around France to view sites and so forth. That's not covered by per diem or anything else, as far as we know, right?
Right, and I should point out that one of our recommendations is that gifts of travel should no longer be exempt from the restricted source rule. So if a restricted source is paying for a gift of travel, right now, that is not subject to the limit, and it's also not subject to the restricted source rule. Our code is explicit about that. I think that should change. So that's one of our recommendations, is that those gifts should not be able to come from restricted sources.
And if the donor passes the money through a third party, is that covered?
So that's one of our recommendations as well, that an intermediary should not be able to be used to pass a restricted source gift. So you can't knowingly give a gift to an intermediary with the intent that it be passed on to a city official when it would be a restricted source gift if you gave the gift directly to the official.
And I think finally, you have addressed to some extent allowing gifts on special occasions. Is that correct?
So that's for the rule against gifts from subordinates. So the subordinate gift rule has exceptions right now that says, well, there are two separate exceptions. One is an exception that allows gifts on occasions of great personal significance. And another one is for gifts that are given on occasions when gifts are traditionally given. So what we're recommending is that those two exceptions be rolled together into one, and that we just explicitly list out when it's okay. So in particular, we're talking about things like a birthday gift, Christmas or other holiday, a birth, adoption of a child, a death in the family, something like that, when it's traditional to give somebody some kind of offering as a gesture, but we think there should be a really low cap on that. So you can give some small nominal thing to your boss if, for example, your boss has a child, but that we should be explicit about what that is. Right now, it's very open-ended. It just says an event of personal significance, and that's open to interpretation. We think we should end that openness to interpretation and just make it a fixed list.
I don't know if you've looked at the rules in Hawaii, but the Hawaii Ethics Commission had met with us over what they call aloha gifts, which are given to say aloha, I guess. I don't know what it is exactly, but aloha gifts are a tradition in Hawaii. They were restricting them, and people were coming very unhappy over that. So
yeah, we've engaged with the Hawaii, or it's the Honolulu Ethics Commission, and last that we talked to them, they were still working on that project. So they hadn't come out with a final recommendation or or law from that. But you're correct, that is what they were looking at. And I think the initial recommendation that the staff were going to make was that all gifts should be prohibited, that there should be no exceptions. And I think now they've reevaluated that to some extent, but again, don't know exactly where that's going to land yet.
Is a restricted source include someone who's seeking to influence city policy, but not a contract? So, for example, groups that are seeking to influence the city's taxation policy, and where they clearly would benefit from a change in the tax policy. Are they a restricted source?
Yes, that would be an attempt to influence. So you would need to see some attempts to influence. You would need to see them, for example, meeting with, let's just say, a member of the board and saying, we want you to vote on this ordinance to change the taxes. That would be an attempt to influence. So then they would be a restricted source for the following 12 months.
Or if they chose to do it through other parties, like in addition to contact lobbying, we have other kinds of lobbying that's precluded, right?
Yeah, we would definitely interpret paying a lobbyist, permit consultant, even somebody who doesn't qualify as a lobbyist but is still going to contact the official on your behalf. We would still consider that an attempt to influence.
So we have major developers who disclose that they are making contributions to a nonprofit that will in turn speak on behalf of the developers' projects. How does that fit in what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, does paying a nonprofit to support a project constitute an attempt to influence? I think it would depend on whether or not the nonprofit, like what is the nonprofit doing? Are they
the nonprofit under our city law? The nonprofit agrees to either write a letter or testify publicly on behalf of the developer's project.
So public testimony at a public meeting is not something that constitutes an attempt to influence. There's an exception for that for obvious reasons. We don't want people who are giving public comment at a commission meeting to become a restricted source for the commissioners. That doesn't really make sense. But I think if they're writing a letter or meeting with the person, yeah, potentially that's an attempt to influence, and that could make them a restricted source.
Even if they're testifying at a public meeting, but were paid to do so by contributions from the major developer?
Probably, yeah, probably. I think the testimony itself would still be exempt, would not be an attempt to influence. But yeah, if there were other activities that they were doing for that payment, potentially that could constitute an attempt to influence.
Well, that's the specific condition of getting the money, is that they've agreed to testify. That's what it says in the law.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at that one. Yeah, if somebody is paid to give public comment at a commission meeting, does that make them a restricted source?
Their organization receives a contribution.
I would guess that it's probably uncommon that an organization would be paid solely to give public comment. I would guess that there's usually other forms of advocacy that they do as part of that arrangement.
All I can tell you is if you go to the major developers page, each developer lists the people that they've given money to and that they will testify. So it's not something where you are guessing. It's disclosed on their part. And that's my questions.
Okay, Commissioner Chu.
Thank you, Chair Lee. I appreciate Commissioner Bush's detailed questions. It's very helpful. First, I'd like to commend staff for this very comprehensive and clear discussion and presentation of where the overlap and weaknesses and conflicts lie in this complicated area. I think it was a mammoth undertaking, but you distilled out all the essential information, makes it easy to follow. So thank you for that. You touched on this a little bit in your discussions with Commissioner Bush, but can you speak a little bit more to the benchmarking that you did in this process? I think that there was reference to Honolulu and also to Los Angeles. Are the state of, our current state of laws, is that kind of typical for gifts in other jurisdictions? And what the recommendations that you're proposing, would that bring us more in line to the middle of the road with regard to the regulation of gifts to our sister jurisdictions, or would we be staking out new ground? So that's my first question. And the second question relates to kind of broadly, what are the consequences of violation? Are there opportunities for any of the affected, the regulated community to seek a waiver? And I was just thinking if there is a restricted source and is having a relationship with a city official or who is prohibited from accepting a gift, but what happens if they get engaged and there's an engagement ring? Would that be permitted, or would that be a violation? And what are those consequences? And perhaps the consequences are in a part 2. And then lastly, I would very much like to hear from the representative from the Airport Commission, and also understand what, if any, feedback you've received from the regulated community on these proposed changes to the gift framework.
Thanks for your questions, Commissioner Chu. So to your first question about jurisdictional comparison, in this report, we looked to other jurisdictions for potential solutions to problems that we were identifying. So for example, we looked to Los Angeles to see if they had a similar exception for routine office courtesies. That's what they call it in Los Angeles. They do have that exception. So basically what we're recommending is to do something like what they do. So if a city employee in Los Angeles goes to the office of a vendor and there are some refreshments or a pen or something, they can accept that. Even though that business is a restricted source, they can take those things because they're available to anybody who visits the office, and they are of very small value. So that's an exception, or an example of where we identified an issue that we have. We looked for how another jurisdiction has solved that issue. We did not take the approach in this project to try to bring our laws necessarily in line with other jurisdictions. I think the way that we approached this is more that we saw a very clear problem. We saw a very clear set of issues, and we sought to address those through whatever means we had. And if it's a means that we saw another jurisdiction doing, or a means that we used to have in San Francisco and then we abandoned it, we created an exception. That's what we're recommending. I think, especially since the gift rules have been around for so long, we thought that was more appropriate. I think we're more likely to take an approach where we're looking at other jurisdictions right off the bat to guide us when we're doing something that's new. So when we were doing behested payments, for example, that was very much part of our analysis, was to see how other jurisdictions were handling behested payments, since it was the first time we were wading into that area.
With regard to Los Angeles, since they are also in California and have the FCCP rules as well, and they have all the FCCP gift exceptions, have they too eliminated a lot of them? Do you know, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know that if they've done that with their restricted source rule.
Thank you. And then there was just the question about the consequences, and then the feedback from the community.
Yeah, so the penalties would be under our standard penalty provision within the government ethics ordinance. So that would be up to $5,000 would be a penalty. I think possibly there could be the multiplier up to 3 times the amount of the gift, but 5,000 is the standard penalty amount.
Is there any plans to, is there an opportunity to review that and to say, is that sufficient given the, I think last count 15 people who have been either arrested, indicted, or have pled guilty to multiple violations of, under these laws, and, is $5,000, enough, a deterrent?
Yes, it's definitely already on our radar, on our checklist of what we want to do in the third phase of the project to look at our penalty provisions. We know that we already have an issue within Article 3. So there's 2 chapters in Article 3 that pertain to conflicts of interest. You have Chapter 1, which is about Form 700 reporting, and then Chapter 2, which is what we're talking about today, that has all the ethics rules in it. They do not share the same penalty provision. They each kind of have different penalties associated with them, and the penalty provision for Chapter 1 is, well, there isn't one really, so it's a problem. So that's what we want to address. So I think looking at the amount too could very well be a part of that project.
Well, I think that clarity is very important because a lot of confusion, can reign with multiple, a long laundry list of exceptions at the state level and at the local level can make it very difficult to know how best to comply, and then and also not knowing what the consequences are. So please do bear that in mind, as I'm sure you will, to continue to hold the principles of clarity and effectiveness, these twin goals, as we continue this work. And any feedback from? Have you received any feedback from the regulated community on these proposals?
A little bit. I've gotten feedback from a couple of stakeholders who were at the stakeholder meetings, but we did not get written comment on this as we had encouraged folks to do, unfortunately.
I'll hope to hear more from the regulated community as we proceed at future meetings on this. And Chair Lee, I leave it up to you as to when we can hear from the Airport Commission representative.
Thank you, Commissioner Chu. As Commissioner Chu mentioned about the Airport Commission, I noticed, I think all of us noticed that under the existing rules, there are 3 agencies that had received meals exemptions. And one of them was the SF Airport Commission. While you recommended the exemption be omitted to the 2 other agencies. One of them was the Port Commission, but your recommendation was either to reform or to retain the current exemption because the Airport Commission deals with a different kind of partners who are internationally owned airlines. So I want to thank Mr. Cohn from the San Francisco Airport Commission.
Chair Lee, might I clarify that? Sorry, before you move on. And okay. I apologize if we weren't clear in the report, but actually our recommendation, our primary recommendation is that exception be removed. That would be our first recommendation. I think that the alternative that we offered was that it be reformed. But we think that the best course of action would be to treat the airport the same as all other departments and to not have this exception anymore.
Yeah, but
so I apologize for that.
Yeah, but for some reason, when you read it, it seems like there's an open door for us to consider either reforming it or retaining it. So it's a little bit different.
It is different. Yes. No, you're absolutely correct about that. We did treat this one differently by providing the alternative. I think we anticipated that there could be interest in the commission in keeping the exception in some form. So just to be constructive and save time and not have to go back to the drawing board and come back to you with an alternative, we just went ahead and provided you with the alternative in this report in case you disagree with our primary recommendation and would like to keep it in some form.
And I appreciate that. And that's why I also appreciate Mr. Cohn to be here to explain why the Airport Commission really feels that it's important for the commission to keep the existing meals exemption. So if Mr. Cohn is ready to...
Good afternoon, Chair Lee. Kevin Cohn, I'm the Acting Chief Financial Officer for San Francisco Airport.
Hi.
Thank you for having me here today. I had worked with Mr. Mr. Cox and Mr. Canning on this project as well. I will also share with the commission that I had maybe the good fortune of working on this exemption 14 years ago with the Ethics Commission. So I was worked as staff very closely with creating this exception. So I was able to provide your staff kind of a deep background on why this exemption was put in place. As the commissioners may or may not know, the San Francisco Airport is an enterprise fund of the City and County of San Francisco. We receive no support financially from the city's general fund. We raise all of our own monies to pay all of our own expenses. So this exception goes back a number of years to 2007. And it really follows really the traditions of the aviation industry that really followed out of the shipping industry, which was these meetings that were held over dinner. And particularly the genesis for this really came from the Asian carriers who would travel to San Francisco to decide if they would like to deploy their aircraft to serve the San Francisco market. And because of certain gift rules and so forth, some of the executives at that time had to decline the dinners at that time, which for the Asian carriers, they would lose face, that they weren't able to express their gratitude and hospitality to possibly serve San Francisco Airport. So it really was the genesis was to accommodate cultural business practices from Asian carriers, deciding if they wanted to serve San Francisco Airport. On that front, as you can imagine, San Francisco Airport is not only competing with our local airports in the Bay Area, but we're competing with Los Angeles International, Portland, Seattle, and even some of the inland airports, because now aircraft can overfly San Francisco and go to places like Denver and Chicago instead of flying here. So these meetings, again, were to try to convince carriers to serve the San Francisco market. Today, San Francisco Airport has an economic impact as of 2019 of $60 billion. So these are we believe are the aircraft are bringing the people to the Bay Area economy, to the hotels, the tourism, and by establishing more routes to San Francisco, we believe that we can bring more economic impact to the Bay Area as well. One thing that I wanted to point out that I was not able to speak to your staff about, that in thinking about my speaking today, one of the things that I think is a little bit different than the concerns that you have for the other city officials, where I think in one of the reports it says, meals can ingratiate themselves with city leaderships to seek favorable terms. Well, in this circumstance, the airlines are signing a lease to operate at San Francisco Airport to pay us. The city is not paying them. And in terms of favorable terms, there's a provision in the Federal Aviation Administration law of how we charge airports. And the basic law says it has to be fair and non-discriminatory, meaning we cannot give one carrier a better financial term than another carrier. It all has to be the same across all carriers. So whereas I'm saying we don't have the ability, whether we have a meal with an airline or not, to provide favorable terms. The lease and use agreement by which the airline signed is one approved by the Airport Commission and the Board of Supervisors. We do not have the ability to amend those terms. Any airline that comes to SFO, they all pay the same fees under the same circumstances. So in conclusion, we would very much like you to keep the provision exemption the way it is, in the sense that it has stood the test of time to allow San Francisco Airport to be the fastest growing airport up to 2019 for international and domestic traffic. It has served our staff well that travel the world trying to convince airlines to fly to San Francisco. And again, The circumstance, like I explained, is a little different. We are not paying these airlines any fees. The airlines pay San Francisco Airport terminal rental rates and landing fees and fees for their office space. So it's a little bit of the inverse of the concerns that we have. So with that, I again appreciate you allowing me to speak, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cohn, for the clarification. Let me see if there are other, Commissioner Bush, you have questions?
Two questions about the arrangement with airlines. How is it decided which airlines are going to have gates? Because I know that not all airlines that would like a San Francisco gate are able to obtain them. And secondly, how is it decided which airlines are going to have hospitality suites, you know, like the ones that you can have a membership in and use in between flights?
Thank you, Commissioner Bush, for your question. The first response is the way they obtain gates is spelled out in the lease and use agreement. Again, that is governed overall by the FAA. The way they do that is they earn gates by the number of scheduled seats they have in the month of August. And depending on how they have scheduled, we allocate the appropriate amount of gates to the carriers. So the carriers that have more service get more gates. Now, having said that, we have a mechanism to your point that where if an airline doesn't want to have what we call a preferential gate, every year we have about 5 to 7 what we call common use gates that are owned by the airport, where airlines that come in maybe on a seasonal basis or on an infrequent basis can pay for the use on those common use gates, just kind of use it and pay for it as needed. The second response, how do airlines determine if they want to have a flight club? That's really up to their demographic of their passenger. And if the airport has space. We are space constrained in our terminal, so it's hard right now to make flight clubs, but that is a big amenity for their passengers. The thing that makes it tough for flight clubs is it's our second highest tier rent, and flight clubs are very expensive for airlines to operate, not only to pay rent, but to operate them. So, but the major carriers, United and Delta and now Alaska, have flight clubs in San Francisco. And then on the international side, most all the internationals either have a club or they share a club with either the Star Alliance or One World Alliance system. Thank you.
You mentioned the desire of Asian companies to have face. But my experience, having worked in international marketing, is that that's equally true in the Far East. So it's not just Asian, I think.
Thank you for that comment, Commissioner Bush. I was using that as just an immediate example that I think that some people identify quickly with that concept, and I know that some people also don't understand the concept of face in foreign cultures as well. So thank you for that clarification.
As a result of that, the U.S. government adopted what they consider to be anti-bribery rules that says that you cannot accept those kinds of gifts if you're a federal employee involved in things.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bush. Commissioner Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn, for your presentation and your advocacy on behalf of the airport, a place that I spend way too much time in. So there's a question I have is trying to understand the cultural advocacy that you're giving. If I take you at your word about that, that the cultures internationally that we're dealing with in terms of putting San Francisco in a better position, could you explain to me the the competitive advantage or disadvantage of this gift removal, which is suggested by staff, am I to, in my kind of basic understanding, to basically say, oh man, China Airlines or Singapore Airlines is going to go to LAX and talk to them, and because they have a gift rule that's less restrictive than ours, that we're liable to lose out because we can't, have them take us to whatever it is, they can't go to Manresa and have a dinner and figure out, that we can do business together. So talk to me about this cultural fact and our rules about trying to not have corruption and competitive advantage or disadvantage.
Thank
you know what I mean? Because it's like, well, let's try to find the airport with the least amount of rules and go there, which I'm assuming is not your advocacy, but I'd like you to speak to it, please.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bell. I cannot tell you definitively that if we accept a meal that an airline is going to fly to San Francisco. We are simply advocating that we are trying to respect the business practices of these organizations and being, again, following the practices of tradition. Since the onset of aviation, this has been a practice. Will an airline not fly to San Francisco because we didn't accept a meal? Probably not. There's so many positive factors of the Bay Area, the demographics, the wealth that's in the Bay Area that will probably cause them to probably continue to fly. But we also want to, again, we're just trying to follow the industry practices. If it's the wish of the commission to exempt that or remove it, we would respect that. And I just wanted to just help the commission understand the bigger picture of competition. And not only are we LA, the aircraft, as you know, are very expensive, and they decide between flying an aircraft to San Francisco versus flying it to Frankfurt, Germany, right? So it's wherever they want to put the aircraft is going to yield the most amount of profit. One thing I also wanted to say is in the possible exception, Mr. Ford put in, alternatively narrow the exception to only permit meals for non-U.S. carriers that are not currently servicing SFO, limited to 1 meal per year and limited to only airport director and up to 3 additional staff. If that were the approach the Ethics Commission took, I would ask that it be the provision of not currently serving SFO be removed, because we have carriers that are serving SFO today who come to meet with us regularly to think about adding additional flights. And if a meeting or a dinner meeting over additional flights, even though they're currently serving, we would not want to turn those opportunities down as well.
And I appreciate your response. And the last question I would have for you is for us to consider, once again, state your position. So we know what our staff's position is. We've queried you about it. You've responded in kind. So, for you to say, oh, the commission voted in the kind of way that I want it to go, what would be your advocacy as to what's the position you want us to take?
Our advocacy is to leave the exception in its current form.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that.
Mr. Khan, I have a follow-up question to Commissioner Bell's question. Had the commission ever considered paying for their own meals? Because, we all dealt with foreign governments and foreign businesses. And I think once they know that while we respect the culture, while we understand the importance of saving face, The importance is you're there, you're sharing the meal. But if you pay for your own meal that they don't pay for, you're still engaged with the conversation, but they are not paying you because the appearance is so critical. When people see you having, extravagant meal, they automatically think that there's bribery involved. But if it is known that you are attending, but this is part of, business practice, or do what we did with the federal government. We just sit there, we don't eat because you're there for the meeting. Sure, they can serve whatever they have, but you sit there, you don't eat, you don't drink the wine. So you are there, you're still giving them the face, because the face is your presence, not actually eating the meal. So have you considered other alternatives? Because it seems like a meal is just a meal. And I do understand that SFO is in stiff competition with other carriers, especially we pride ourselves of being the gate to the Pacific. So I certainly do not want to hamper the commission's ability to attract future, business to support the local economy. But at the same time, it doesn't sound like a meal exemption is a make or break kind of a rule for you.
Thank you, Chair Lee, for the suggestion. We have not considered that, but I'll take that back to the Director, Ivar Satero, for consideration in the future. And if I may, just one more comment. In light of COVID, as you can imagine, we lost 94% of our air traffic in April of last year. International traffic has not returned. We are working hard with the carriers right now to try and get carriers to return as we see how the pandemic pans out. But even though we've lost, some carriers have walked away from SFO, we will have our work cut out for us going forward to try and reattract alternative carriers to serve the market as well. So I would appreciate if the commission took that into the thought process as well, trying to rebuild the international market here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kong. Any other questions? Thank you again. And let's open up for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can, just for a moment, Mr. Cohn, thank you so much. You kind of took me back. 23 years out of my 25-year career with the City and County of Denver was with the Department of Aviation. So I worked for Denver International Airport for 23 years. So you just took me back. And please stand by.
Did they have a meals exemption there?
Yes, they did. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you've just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of Agenda Item 10, presentation, discussion, and possible action on findings and recommendations of report on gifts to individuals dated August 2nd, 2021. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by.
While we're waiting, can I ask Mr. Ford, do you know if LAX, who is our biggest competitor, do they have a meals exemption still?
They do not. No, they do not have this kind of industry-specific meal exception. LA has a kind of de minimis exception of the type that we're also that we have right now and are recommending no longer having. So in theory, you could accept a meal through that general exception, and that basically just says you can accept a small gift once per year from a restricted source. So they could use that in LA, but they do not have any kind of industry-specific meal exception.
Madam Chair, we have a caller in the queue. Please stand by. Thank you, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Commissioners, I've been involved for the last 20 years trying to find out why there is such a big difference between the federal government, because I mostly work with the federal government, and this divide with the city and county of San Francisco. The Ethics Commission, the Sunshine Task Force, the Controller's Office, all these many years have done very little to stop the corruption. And what we are doing here is just beating around the mulberry bush. Right now, as we speak, we have people who represent the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and they haven't learned anything. They're using the Contract Monitoring Division to contact whoever they want to, like a limited number of contractors, so that they can give them contracts. There's no law enforcement. When we had a Human Rights Commission, we had a real commission. Now we have the Contract Monitoring Division. It has no commission. It comes under the city administrator. The city administrator and the mayor can meet and can make a deal. And I don't see anything mentioned in this so-called change, presentation, discussion, and possible action on findings and recommendations for reports on gifts to individuals. It's going on right now. There's a person called Dwayne Jones. He does whatever he wants to. And the Ethics Commission knows about it, but does nothing. So we need changes where there is enforcement, quick enforcement. There are too many loopholes. Some of the loopholes are being changed in a manner where there is an even greater loophole. So, commissioners, let us not fool ourselves. The Ethics Commission was fast asleep at the cockpit, and the only person that woke you up was a person called David Anderson from the FBI.
Your 30 minutes, or your 3 minutes has expired?
Something, but now that entire investigation has been stalled. Thank you very much.
Please stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers, no further callers in the queue. You are muted. Chair Lee, please stand by. Look, your microphone's on, but we cannot hear you. I cannot hear you.
Perhaps turning up the sound will help.
Can you try now? Because what I did is I unmuted you, then I muted you. I muted you, then I unmuted you. Can you try speaking again, Chair Lee? Yeah, it looks like we lost audio on you. Hold on, please stand by. Jared, are you in the house?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'll try to contact the commissioner.
All right, thank you. Chair Lee, can you I heard a little.
I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Now we got you.
Okay.
Now we got you.
Okay. So the public comment is closed on agenda item number 10. Going back to the airport commission, because the staff has made the recommendation and also an alternative. So if we were to vote today on this package, are we voting on all three of your options, or do we have to choose one? How does that work? Because you're recommending omitting the exemption, and you're also offering alternatives to reform the existing exemption, right?
Correct. Yeah, maybe it would be helpful for me to kind of give a little overview of what the next steps might look like. So, as I mentioned, this phase on gifts, we split into two reports. So there's this report on gifts to individuals, and then the next report will be gifts made through departments. What we're recommending is that you vote to tell us which recommendations you would like us to draft in coordination with the city attorney's office into a draft ordinance and a set of draft regulation amendments. And we would do the same process with our recommendations for gifts through departments. And then once you've had a chance to vote on both sets of recommendations, we would bring you a single consolidated draft ordinance and a single consolidated set of draft regulations that you could then take a final vote on. But I think in the interest of bringing you legislation that's likely to be approved, it's been a useful practice, I think, to have the votes happen before we draft the legislation. In other words, for you to vote on which recommendations you like and what you would like to see in draft form. So that way then we go and draft it up, we put it before you, you make sure that comports with your understanding of the recommendations, and then you can basically do a final vote to approve the legislation.
Okay.
So I guess to answer your question, it would be most helpful if you were to choose which route you'd like to go on the airport exception. If you'd like us to draft legislation, or it would actually be draft regulations, omitting it, or if you'd like to see us bring you a draft regulation that keeps it in some different form.
Different form, okay. Commissioner Bell, your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lee. I was wondering if, now that we've heard from Mr. Cohn, if we might hear from Mr. Ford on any responses or reactions that he has to what was said that might be informative for us as we go into this vote. If there's any reactions or thoughts in terms of what Mr. Cohn brought before us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to appreciate Mr. Cohn for working with us. I think engaging with departments has been an incredibly important part of this project. I'm really grateful for all the folks who have helped us understand the backgrounds of these rules, et cetera. So it's definitely very helpful to do. I think going back to that section of the purposes and intent of the government ethics ordinance that I put up, the rules are not here just to remove undue influence. They're also here to remove the appearance of undue influence. We don't just need to convince ourselves internally within the city that we're doing the right thing. We also need to convince the people of San Francisco. And I think if your average person saw this exception, they would not appreciate the complexities and intricacies of the dynamics going on. They would just see a potential city contractor giving a gift, and for some reason there's an exception that allows it. And for us, although there are some countervailing policy interests in keeping the exception, we think on balance the equities weigh heavily against the exception, and it would be much better for it no longer to be here. I think Commissioner Lee, or Chair Lee, brought up kind of what we think is the better alternative is for the department or the employee to pay for the meal. As I mentioned, the controller's office allows departments to do this. So if it is important for these meals to happen as part of the airport's business, the airport should budget it. They should pay, they should reimburse the employees to participate in these meals. And I think it's okay for us as a city to drive our ethics policy. In other words, we do not have to comply with the norms of an industry. We do not have to comply with the norms in other countries. It's okay, and we should do this. We should drive what we think is the right thing to do. So I think, again, on balance, we would still prefer to not have this exception.
Commissioner Chief?
Thank you. I would like to see language that would reform the exception. I appreciate both sides of this coin. We are still in a pandemic, and you know, are there ways to revise the exemption that, and I appreciate Mr. Cohn coming. And I think that on principle, yes, it's important to be consistent and have bright line rules here. And I don't know if that revision contemplates what you know, could contemplate something that the same thing that Chair Lee, you have proposed, that it's, you know, the exception is that the city can pay for it, and the commission can pay for the meal. So I'd like there to be, I would like to see not just, I'd like to see on the one hand a version with it out, and then a version with something exploring an alternative of significant reform. That would be helpful for me in deciding. Thank you.
So what's the pleasure of my colleagues? Does anyone want to make a motion to move this forward with the recommendations from Commissioners Bell and Chu? Or should we table it for until next month, until we hear from more folks? Because Mr. Ford, you mentioned that you haven't heard back from many of our stakeholders. Maybe they needed more time to digest because it is a pretty hefty document.
I would say that we should continue to move forward. I think that there will still be opportunities at the next meeting and along the way for stakeholders to weigh in on this, and that I believe that there's also a part 2 coming to this. Right. Yeah. Would I think that we should continue to make forward progress on this. And then I think that if Mr. Ford, could you kind of refresh our recollection on the legislative process? So if once we get to an ordinance that we can all agree on, is that something that has to go to a ballot measure for approval? Is that the idea?
These legislative recommendations would not need to appear on the ballot, but they certainly could. That would be one path. So it could either go through the board and the mayor, the traditional legislative route, or you could place it on the ballot. Either action would require 4 votes. So all 4 sitting commissioners would need to vote to do either one. But those are the 2 options. And I can tell you, as we get into the later stages of this project, and especially as we see what's happened so far or not happened so far with the behesive payment ordinance, we will definitely be presenting you with an analysis of all legislative paths forward so that you can decide what you think is going to be most effective to move these policies.
And then when would be the next election? We have the special election in September. I don't believe there's an election in November of this year, which would be too soon anyway. Is there one in March or June next year?
June, yeah. The primary will be in June, and then there's the general in November next year.
Okay, so June of next year.
Okay. I see Deputy City Attorney Shen's face. So you have comments?
Sorry, my apologies. I just briefly popped in to confirm that the next scheduled election would be the June primary. Okay. And also just to echo something that I think Pat has already remarked on, there could be a mix of approaches here. So a lot of the changes that the staff is currently recommended could be accomplished through regulation. instead of through ordinance. So it wouldn't be necessarily sort of a legislative project at its heart, because a lot of these things that we can change by regulation on our own. And one other procedural matter I did want to briefly address is sort of meet and confer obligations, because we are changing the rules that apply to largely almost all city employees. And if they violate those rules, that can result in penalties or discipline that they would be subject to. We also have an obligation to meet and confer with the affected unions as well.
Okay, great.
So that's another step along the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the information and clarification. So do we have a motion to move this?
I move it.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
I'll second. Okay, so it's been moved and second.
I'm not clear on what the motion is.
I think the motion is to adopt agenda item number 10, the gift to individuals, as drafted, because even in the draft form, under the exemption for the SF Airport Commission, the staff had left open, even though the recommendation was to omit, but there were a couple of alternatives included in there. So I imagine we can revisit it in the future when it's in the draft form and what have you. So I think the motion is to pass the gift report as drafted now.
Chair Lee, might I ask a question to follow up?
Yes.
Thank you. So to clarify, is it the case that the commission is looking for language to be drafted on the recommendations as shown in the report, and as to the recommendations with regarding the exemptions to the current exemptions to the airport, that you would like to see language that could accomplish either approach that's there, either retaining the exemption or narrowing it or eliminating it? So you'd like to see the language for all of those options brought forward to the next discussion. Is that correct?
Thank you, Director Pelham. That was my question. I wasn't sure what we're doing. So yes, that's the question I have.
I had assumed we are not going, my understanding is under the staff's report and recommendation, we had a couple of not options, but scenarios. One is complete omission of the existing rule. The second one is to amend the exemption rule. And maybe I could clarify by saying maybe the exemption rule still applied, but staff meals will be reimbursed by the commission. Would that make sense?
My only comment on that is I think if the city is paying it and reimbursing the staff, essentially there is no gift because there is no receipt of something of value. So, right, it would not be a gift. But I guess there are a couple of options I might suggest. If it's helpful for the commission to see language that would accomplish, either of the options that were identified as to the airport exemption, the commission we could bring that back. You could also take that piece out, vote on the full matter, and then separate those items out if you want to have further discussion about that. But I think either way we can accomplish what it seems like you're looking for as a body, is to bring back both options for you to continue that discussion. I think we're just trying to get clarity about the provisions and what kind of progress we can bring back for the next discussion so that it meets your expectations.
Well, I'm just looking for anything to expedite the process and also the time. The meeting is already close to 1:30.
Okay.
So would my colleagues be open to adopting the gift rule, taking out the airport commission piece so that we can address it with final language at the next meeting so that we can at least allow the staff to proceed? Or do you just want to adopt the report as is? I'm just open. I just want to expedite everything right now. Commissioner Bush?
Yes, I made the motion, and my intent was to move the whole entire package forward because there's plenty of time for us to address issues around the airport per se, because it all comes back to us, however we choose to adopt the language. So I didn't see a need to hold things up for right now.
Okay, so let's just move with that. Because Mr. Cohn has also said he hasn't discussed what we just discussed with his commission. So let's just proceed. Let's call the roll then, now that we have a motion and a second, to adopt the Give to Individuals report as currently drafted in front of us.
A motion has been made and seconded. I'm
sorry, have we taken public comment on this matter?
I thought we did.
Yes, we did.
We did? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for confirming.
A motion has been made and seconded, and I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Chair Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
With 4 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you, commissioners. Now we're getting close to home. Agenda item number 11, continued discussion and possible action on revised draft of the annual report for fiscal year 21. I think this is the third presentation on this report. So, Director Pelham.
Thank you, Chair Lee. This under this item, we have included for your consideration, based on the feedback from the last 2 meetings, a revised draft annual report that still reflects activities at the Commission through June 30th of 2021. And so we took the feedback that we received at last month's meeting, tried to make it a bit clearer for readability about the essential elements from the report. So we have it here for your further feedback. If the Commission has more feedback you'd like to give, we're happy to take that. We're also happy to, if the Commission is comfortable with this report, finalize it with your approval and send it and post it for distribution publicly.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bush, you have your hands up.
Yes, I do. Thank you. This is a vastly improved version of the annual report from what we've seen in the past. So my congratulations to Director Pelham and to her staff for the work that they've gone and put into this. I had just a few addendums that I think would improve the report. There's nothing in here about lobbyists per se. They're in the chart, but there's not a section that says either that we've delayed auditing or going deeper into the lobbyist reports because of constraints on staff, but that will be coming in the coming year. So that could go into the final section that you've got. But somewhere I recommend that we include mention of the fact that we're touching on the issue of lobbyists, because you know the lobbyists will be looking to see if they're in the report. So that's number one. Number two is I think it's appropriate for us to acknowledge that we don't stand alone and apart from ethics issues, that we have to send recommendations to the city attorney and to the district attorney, and that we get feedback from the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And in various cases, we send things to other departments, like on some whistleblower cases, we go to DHR. So I just think that it makes the Ethics Commission more clearly the focal point, but not the exclusive point for issues having to do with ethics and compliance with the city rules. So I would like to see those changes included in the annual report.
If I might, through the chair, respond to Commissioner Bush.
Please.
Commissioner Bush, we do have content about the lobbyists who are registered, information about the lobbying program on page 16 of the report. And so we do have information there. And I think we do make reference throughout where we have been working with DHR and other colleagues, including citing the controller's report specifically. So I think we heard that feedback and we're, in my view, responsive in trying to have that information as clearly as we could to identify where we have been working in partnership with other city agencies on our key priorities. Thank you.
I think it needs to be called out more clearly.
If I may, thank you, Commissioner Bush, for your comments. This is the fourth time that the draft annual report is brought up for commission consideration. And I think that each and every time we had made comments, we had made suggestions, and I think the staff has addressed that. But at some point, I do think that while respecting the commissioner's comment, but they may not need to be absolutely included in this annual report because already it's been addressed here. And I would recommend that we approve this report and include the ongoing and outstanding suggestions in other items that will come up in future discussions, so that we don't constantly have hold this up, because it's an annual report and it's already 4 months overdue. So that's my recommendation. Commissioner Bush, your hand is still up. You want to comment again, or?
Well, I was just looking at page 16 that Director Pelham referred to it. I don't really see anything here that speaks to me of Facebook or of lobbyist reports. So maybe she can point more directly to that. But have we decided that we're attaching to the annual report the budget analyst recommendations and our response?
We have, through the chair, if I might, we have linked to that report in the section where we talk about the Bureau of Budget Legislative Analyst Office audit of the commission. We cite to both this January report, provide a live link directly from this report to the update that we did in January of this year to the commission at the commission meeting, and also to the one most recently we did last month that gave a detail of where we are at this point in time. Even though it was past the June 30th fiscal year end, technically, we wanted to make sure that we provided the most recent information to people reading this report. So we have included that live link as well, as we have with many of the other underlined items in the report.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve this annual report.
I'll second.
Yes. Thank you. So let's open up for public comment.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you've just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 11. Continued discussion and possible action on further revised draft of Ethics Commission annual report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. If you haven't already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You'll hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by.
Hello.
Commissioner Bush, you're unmuted.
I'm in a meeting.
I just muted Commissioner Bush. Thank you. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a roll. Take a roll.
I know what you meant. I know what you meant.
Okay.
We can see land coming. We can see land coming, Chair Lee. Hang in there. Hang in there. You're almost there.
Yeah, almost there.
A motion has.
Okay.
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush. Commissioner Bush.
There we go.
On mute.
I couldn't get my cursor over. Yes. Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Chair Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Bell.
Aye.
With 4 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you to Director Pelham and your staff for working so hard on this well-written report. Thank you. Next agenda item, discussion of the Executive Director report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lee. The report this month has a variety of updates for you. First and foremost, on behalf of the staff, I do want to express our appreciation, as you all have, to former Commission Chair Ambrose. We've also, like you, very much have appreciated over the past year, in particular, her vision and her focus and her dedication. So we owe her deep gratitude, and we're adding that on behalf of all of the staff with your well wishes to her today. Our budget was signed into law July 29th by the mayor, and so we are now in the process of moving ahead with posting and developing the postings for the 8 positions that we will be hiring this fiscal year, hopefully by the end of this calendar year. We're keeping that as a significant priority for us. Also, we updated and have linked to you in this report our Racial Equity Action Plan. That's very much linked with our ongoing hiring activities. And so we took and updated the plan for where we are at this point in time with the beginning of fiscal year 22. So we wanted to provide that as an update with where things were currently, and are happy to schedule that if of interest to the commission for a separate item at a future meeting, but we have updated that with where we currently are to reflect our focus on hiring activities. We also have, I've listed a few items regarding legislation Pat Ford mentioned earlier on his report, so I won't repeat, but we also have a couple of links to our disclosure pages where we're providing information about local recall efforts, and also some new information, as the commission had indicated, about the redistricting task force and how the ethics laws apply to those individuals. Finally, one brief note: with the city is continuing, obviously, as you know, to very closely monitor what's happening with COVID-19 and Delta, and the urgency for everybody to be vaccinated and to be able to reopen the city as well as possible, and has continued to focus on an early September 7th operational date for more city offices to open their offices. We're in the process of planning that, and we are looking forward to providing more information next month. And of course, any new information will be posted on our webpage about the reopening of our physical offices to enable the public to access the same services that they have in the past with us in the coming month. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, and happy to answer any questions that you might have for me at this time. Any other suggestions or requests for future meetings in terms of my report. Thank you.
I just have a couple of quick questions to the director. Do you know what our vaccination rate is for the staff?
I'm sorry, the
vaccination rate for the office.
I do not have that information in front of me, and I'm happy to follow up if I can with talking with our colleagues over at the DHR.
Thank you. Commissioner Bush and Commissioner Chu.
What I might just report is that we did have 100% reporting by the July 29th deadline as requested of all staff. So we appreciated that effort and compliance.
Great.
Commissioner Bush. Thank you, Chair Lee. Can you come back to me in a minute?
Oh, sure. Commissioner Chu?
Yes, thank you, Chair Lee. Given the current resurgence of the Delta variant in San Francisco and the additional restrictions that the mayor just announced for indoor dining and things like that, as far as you know, is the timetable for a return to the office and in-person meetings, for example, for this commission still on track for next month, or are we still in a wait and see mode?
I think as to commission meetings, it's still a wait and see mode. We have not heard any further directives or information from City Hall or from the city administrator about when commissions should expect to start meeting. We understood over the last several months the ideal date looked like it was in the fall, September, October-ish. But we haven't heard anything more specifically. As to our reopening physically in an office, the city has, of course, issued an all mandatory mask requirement at this point, given the Delta figures. And I can tell you that we are following all news and all directions that the city administrator and the city human resources department issues and the public health offices issue on this front. And we'll keep watching it every day. If something changes, we will, of course, alert you. At this point, we don't have a basis to believe that there is a change. But again, we know that we can't expect always that things won't change. So we're following it very closely and following all public health directives that are coming our way.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I know that many companies have deferred or delayed the return to office when it was, after Labor Day was a target date, but many have postponed further. So yeah, please do keep us posted as the guidance comes out from the city, and I hope that they will provide guidance because this is a important issue, and greater clarity is always better than less. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chu. I appreciate that, and I do know that as we plan, we are, and the city generally is planning to be open offices, but also to recognize that there is a hybrid work model that we're moving towards, that it will continue to be remote work and some physical presence in offices. So we'll keep you posted as we know more and as the date approaches. Appreciate the reminders.
Great. And then I don't know if now's the time, but I would like to have time on the calendar at the next meeting through the chair for a discussion of the racial equity plan that we can take a little more time to do a deeper dive. Would be good.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Commissioner Bush?
Thank you, Chair Lee. And I would like to associate myself with Commissioner Chu's call for racial equity review. Most of what we have in our plan has to do with internal processes, but not as much of our public-facing effort, including our facility to provide information in languages other than English. And now with the new census data coming out, it really underscores the need for us to provide greater facility in languages other than English, as well as to underserved populations that may speak English but are underserved for other reasons. The question I was going to raise earlier was touched on by Director Pelham, and just in part, and that is, with a hybrid meeting, are we talking about allowing commissioners who, for medical reasons, find it challenging to come to the city hall and they can participate remotely while the rest of the commission is meeting physically? Do you have a policy on that yet?
Through the chair, Commissioner Bush, we will be following city policy on that. We have raised the question and are exploring what the options are. And I would be quite confident that the city will have and be mindful of policies that enable the broadest participation by all commissioners. So we will certainly keep all the commission posted, but we have asked that question and we are looking forward to hearing more from them.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more comments? If not, why don't we just switch a little bit, open up for public comment before we take a vote?
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item 12, discussion of Executive Director's report, an update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's previous meeting. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by.
And Chair Lee, if I might also note, the report is for informational purposes. So unless the commission wishes to take action on something, there is no action required on this particular item.
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much. So since we don't need to take any action on this item, let's move to item number 13, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. I already have down the racial equity plan suggested by Commissioner Chu. So that's already included for the September meeting. Anything else that colleagues want to bring up?
I don't know how to do this directly, but I think the conversation we had with Deputy City Attorney Shen and with, you know, with Mr. Pierce about how is it that we balance the information that we're doing on, you know what I mean? So we might need a primer, a conversation on how, you know, the balance between not being a rubber stamp, but not also just substituting our judgment for the staff's. I think it would be good to have that conversation.
Okay.
So I don't know the exact like little pithy little phrase to put it on the agenda, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The staff will work out the beautiful language for us for the next meeting. But we
can sponsor it with our chair. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Happy to.
Okay, great.
I think Commissioner Bush is raising his hand physically.
My apologies. Okay.
I always am. Thank you. Sometimes I forget and don't lower it, but this time I meant it. I would like to add a discussion about the stipulation agreements and what the commissioners have access to. I know that the way that this is set up is that the guard rails on it are a pilot project yet to be finalized. And I think that I would like to see a discussion about whether we can have greater information about what goes into the stipulation agreements. So would you add that to the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, I see that as very related to mine. I don't know how, you know, we can figure, we don't need to quibble about it here, but you know what I mean, right?
It's
And,
the same concept.
and the other thing is, I don't know if this goes in the future category, is the conversation we had about the meal exemption. Is there something that comes back to us and we discuss more? I didn't want to have that, I didn't want to drop that.
And I think it's important that we be given meals if everyone else is.
I think for the meals exemption, like whether the agencies pay for it or you accept it from whether a restricted source or even from just anybody, I think this whole meals thing really warrants a broader discussion. So I would like to see that at the future.
That's what I was suggesting.
Yeah.
That we put it on.
Exactly. Maybe not September, but
right.
Maybe within the next couple of months. Thank you. Okay, so we have three.
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Okay.
Commissioner Chu and myself and the staff, we've had a conversation, and now that I think with our budget and positions, about how we are more outward facing about training and orientation to a broader group, and to really have a discussion about, we can't do all 35,000 employees, but there is some way that I think we can have more of a presence in the front of the mind. And so we met with staff, and I just want to make sure that that doesn't die. It doesn't have to be at the next meeting, but I want to keep it on the agenda about, I don't want to say a campaign, but an approach, some protocols for us to be more active in having city employees know that they have ethics responsibilities and what they are. So that's an agenda item that, because Commissioner Chu and I did meet with the staff, and I just want to make sure that at some point there's a follow-up. Doesn't have to be next month, but it should be in the queue.
Definitely.
I'd like to round that out to include training for community groups in the media on resources that are available at ethics, because I think that we are missing something by not getting more input and more eyes on the work that's going on.
Okay, anything else? This is your Christmas list. Okay, we have 6 items. Okay, we have 6 proposed agenda items already. So let's open up for public comments on agenda item number 13.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you've just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item 13, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Okay. Item number 14, additional opportunities for the public comment on matters appearing and not appearing on today's agenda. Public comments, please.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are any callers in the queue. Once again,
Can
for those
commissioners comment in this period, or is it only the public?
Vice Chair Lee, if you want to.
Pardon me?
I'm Chair Lee. Do you want to go ahead and discuss first before asking for public comment, or you want to? I think Commissioner Bush wants to.
I want to make a comment. I want to make sure I'm in the right window.
You can comment anytime. Yeah, you can comment anytime. This is for any other opportunities.
I would just like to point out that there's been a substantial and a greatly improved upgrade to the ethics webpage. If you go to look at www.sfethics.org, our page is much better than it was a month ago. There are still things that will be changing, but it's clearly more relevant and more timely. So my congratulations, and I urge the public to take a look at that page.
Thank you. Commissioner Chair.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is, it may not be the right agenda item to do it, but I just thought of Mr. Tyler Field. He does such a great job in presenting the dashboards, and I think the public as well as the commission could benefit from a refresher on that, maybe not at the next meeting, but if we could have another presentation, and I'd like to understand how we can push more of that information out and make more of the public aware that there are these incredible tools that are accessible to them, so that the Form 700 electronic filing data can be pulled up. They can look at the dollars and the geographic origin of contributions to candidates and ballot measures. I think that there's a treasure trove of information that can be leveraged and accessed more widely to the benefit of the entire community. And I would love to be able to understand how we can, what we are doing and how we can help create greater awareness of those resources.
That's right. And it's been a while. It's been almost a year since you made the presentation. So
yes.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Any public comments?
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item 14, additional opportunities for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws Article 7, Section 2. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we are on agenda item number 14, adjournment. I don't think we need a motion for this one or public comment. Do we need a motion?
No, we eliminated that last month, so now it's just, yeah. But if you want,
okay,
it's just ending salutation.
Congratulations, Chair Lee, on steering our ship. It's going to be all downhill from here.
We're all rolling together toward the same direction, same strength, same view to keep us afloat. So thank you so much, my colleagues and the staff. And we adjourn before 2 o'clock today.
Bravo.
Hopefully it's a record. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you,
Ken.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Awesome job, Chair Lee.
Congratulations, Chair Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, everyone.